see. Oh, get some light. Okay. So we are live, yay! Once again, and I have a cookie. So today we're going to be talking about some stuff, but I don't know what it is. Let's see. Recent comments. Let's talk about some recent comments until we get some questions. So I just published the video for the linking from an vowel to consonant sounds between words or inside of a word, like energy or smarter. And that seems to be doing quite well so far. Hello, Gabriel. So you have questions, yes? How are you doing, by the way? Hope everything is good. Let's see. Don't have a whole lot of people yet. I forgot to schedule this one earlier. I just made it last night, so should I ask now or wait for people to come? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if you want to start asking questions now, you can. Because I mean, in the replay, people are going to be looking to get straight into the content. But if you want to wait, you can. I mean, we can chat about other stuff. It doesn't really matter. What is going on with my comments? Come on. So I assume David is going to be coming. David brought up a very interesting combination word order. I want to talk a bit about that today. Because that's in the most recent video, I talked about smarter and order, but then word order, you actually have an extra R on top of that and two flap Ds. So that's really hard to do. What's your zodiac sign? Virgo. So yeah, born in September. I am an Earth child, very much an Earth child. In high school, I used to have really long hair, and yeah, I was kind of like a hippie, basically. So that sounds like a Virgo, I think. I would still have long hair, except, for genetic reasons, I am losing my hair, unfortunately, and won't really grow out at this point. So, swear to God, I knew you were a Virgo, not you knew. Yeah, typo. Aries. Yeah, I don't know much about astrology. Aries, god of war, but like astrology, zodiac, all that stuff. It's kind of interesting. I looked a little bit at it in the past. I'm kind of into that stuff more or less, depending on what it is we're talking about. But I don't really know all the crazy details about all the signs and this and that or whatever. So I know some people are really into that, and that's cool. But one thing that's kind of interesting. So one of my roommates, who I've known since high school, right? He is a Leo, and he was born 2 weeks before me. So he's kind of getting close to that Virgo line. I don't remember exactly when the change is, but he's a Leo. His birthday's like August 20th, 21st, or something like that. And we're like super, super similar. Like we have some differences, of course, but we're like especially back in high school, like we were kind of almost like the same person in a way. And the interesting thing is that he was born 2 weeks before me, but I was born 2 weeks late. So when like they had to like actually take me out, and I was purple, I wasn't breathing. Apparently, I didn't want to be born. um, and so I was supposed to come out and probably be a Leo, but I didn't. And so him and I would have been born at the same time. And so it's like the little differences that we have is because I was born 2 weeks later, I guess. I don't know. It's really weird. But well, we still only have, it says two people here. I still think it counts me as one of them because I don't think I've ever seen it go to zero. But maybe there's another person here. I don't know. If you want to ask questions now, I mean, you can. It's been 6 minutes. So we can get going. When other people show up, I mean, we can always go back and review if needed. But let's see. Other than that, I can go off of recent comments and talk about that. But my first question is, we don't want to use it's here. My first question is about the pronunciation. Okay, for yeah. So these two words are really stupid. This is a perfect example of why I don't want you to focus on, or why I don't want you to trust the spelling. The R spelling patterns can be useful, but at the end of the day, you really have to listen. Okay. Um, Hello, Sedent. How are you? Thank you for joining us. So we know that, as I talked about in the main R lesson, no, it was the main R lesson, and I think also the R spelling pattern lesson, not R colored vowels. We have ER, IR, UR. And these, with certain exceptions and whatnot, these are generally pronounced There's nothing special about them, they're just I'm pretty good, Seaton. Thank you for asking. We're taking questions. Gabriel has questions prepared, so that's what we're starting with. So if you have any questions, you can also ask those as well. But okay. We have that. Now, with OR, this is the stupid one. Because if it's stressed, it's supposed to be or, okay, which is an R colored O. If it's not stressed, then it almost always gets pronounced as the same as the other three. And that will also go between, like, say, for example, the word or, like this or that. The full pronunciation is or, but it usually gets reduced to because it's usually not stressed and it's a very small grammar word. Okay, there are certain words. Notice, like I just said, words, and it seems to be if it's W plus OR and it's stressed. This is what I've noticed. Maybe there's some other cases here. This is the big exception to the OR spelling, where even if it's stressed, it's still going to be pronounced not or. So we have words, we have worm, or worms if it's plural, work. There's some other ones. Okay. So that is generally what happens with that. So for the first part of your question, worm, it's W to to worm, worm. Okay. Then for the AR spelling pattern is also a big problem. The OR is pretty reliable and consistent. It's a little more complicated than the ERIRUR, but it's not that bad. AR is the most complicated, stupid one of them all, because even though you see AR, it could be pronounced it could be pronounced or, it could be pronounced R, it could be pronounced whoever knows, whatever. Air, especially if there's a silent E, air, where, care, dare. So you really cannot trust the AR spelling. Um, that being said, in the word warm, sorry, I've spelled worm because I was thinking of OR. Warm, okay. Also the word war, which is, it's going to be pronounced exactly like this word, which is the past tense of wear. So you wear clothes. I wore that shirt. So warm. This is an R-colored O that in the first two words, warm and war, are spelled with an AR. So again, you really want to go based off the sound, not on the spelling. And then world as well. Yes, I didn't even notice that, Sedent. That's another good one. World. That's a very difficult word. But yes, that is also an sound. Okay, so I hope that answers your first question, Gabriel. If you have any follow-up, any other questions related to that, you can ask them, or we can move to your next question. And of course, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask at any time. Meanwhile, I'm going to eat my cookie. Anyway, gone and gun. Yeah, that's a good pair. So, a brief note about spelling pattern. Very often, O-N or O-N-E. Let's see. Yeah. Well, okay. It depends. O-N by itself is often the fifth vowel, on. O-N-E is often own, like bone, cone, stone, or it might be one, right? It might be a schwa sound, like the number one. So again, you really can't trust the spelling here. Gone is an exception where it has a silent E, but it's still the fifth vowel on the vowel chart. And again, for those who don't know what I mean when I say fifth vowel on the vowel chart, there's a link in the description to my downloads on my website where you can find all of that. So g, a, n, silent E. That's it. Gone, gone, gone. Okay. Then for the word gun, that is a schwa. Technically, it's the upside down V in IPA, the not true schwa, as I call it. But yes, that is the schwa sound, the sound. Vowel number 6 on the vowel chart. That's a very difficult pair, 5 and 6, or a and Many people, many English learners have difficulty with that. It's a very common problem. So, yeah. Did you have any like specific question related to those two words, or you just wanted me to go over the pronunciation to make sure? Because, yeah. Anyway. It's always so weird where like I ask a question and I have to wait because I can't actually hear you, right? So you have to type it. That's okay. We have 4 people, and I know of 2 of them. I don't know who the other 2 are. Say hi to people. No need to be afraid. We're all friends here. Just pronunciation related. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, as I said, O-N with a silent E usually is not the 5th vowel. This is an exception. So, hey guys, how are y'all doing? I think David just came from Texas. Hello. Thank you for joining us this week. I was glad that you commented on the most recent video because, you know, haven't seen you in a little while. And I figured you'd come to the live stream. So here we are. Oh yeah, that reminds me. So Right now, I'm answering Gabriel's questions. If you have any questions, of course, you can bring them up. Feel free to just put them in the chat. I'll get to them. I do want to talk a little bit about the combination word order because you mentioned that in your comment, so we can discuss that a little bit as well. But okay, Gabriel says, so another one, every time I hear asked, I never hear the T. Interesting. I would assume you never hear the K. um, yeah, this is a bit of a tricky one for a couple of reasons. So when we say ask, okay, it's regular verb, present tense, whatever, no ed. We have a fourth vowel, we have an S, and we have a K. Right? So ask, ask. And that's fine. The K, you could glottal stop it or stop it, whatever. Ask, that's fine. When we add the ed, for those of you who don't know, the ed ending, I'm going to make a video about this in the future too. If the verb ends with the t sound or the d sound, then the e is pronounced as the second vowel I, or maybe a schwa. You can maybe do it as a schwa, and then the d is a d. So like weighted, right? Weighted. But for all other verbs that don't end in a t or a d, if the sound before the ed is voiced, then the ed is going to be pronounced just as a d sound. And if the sound before the ed is voiceless, then it's going to be pronounced just as a t sound. There might be a couple random exceptions to that, but I think that's a pretty solid, consistent rule. And the reason this happens is because T is voiceless, right? So if it's a voiceless sound, it's easier to keep it voiceless. So it's a very common thing we do. So when we say asked, right, the full, clear, enunciated version with all the sounds there would be asked, okay? Asked, and you notice it's kind of hard to do kt, right? Because they're two stop sounds right next to each other. So first, of course, don't say asked, right, or asked or something. We don't do that. The E is silent. Now, there's a couple things that can happen here. You're saying that you're not hearing the T. Ask. What I would assume, now if there's some sort of connection, like asked him, asked him, asked him. So you'll probably hear maybe the K would actually probably drop. We're going to talk about that in a second, but you should hear like that D sound, T sound connect over, ask dim, dim, and become more of a D because that's what happens when T connects. So you should hear that, but if you just hear like, oh, I already asked, right, or whatever, what's probably happening is they're doing a stop on the D, which is a T sound here. So maybe you're hearing like ask, and then with like a stop T. And if you do that, of course, there's not going to be an actual T sound that gets pushed out. But the stop or the hold, depending on how it's done, will be interpreted as a T sound. Much more commonly, we keep the T very clearly. Like maybe we still stop it, but we'll say the T, but we'll drop the K. And that's because we have another pronunciation rule. English does not like three consonant sounds together. Now this is sounds, not letters. I'm supposed to put sounds with an S. It's a typo. Three consonant sounds together, okay? Usually what will happen if you see three consonant sounds together is the middle one will disappear. This is a very common thing. I mean, it's relatively uncommon for us to have three consonant sounds in a row to begin with, but when we do, it's a pretty common thing that happens. So asked is actually very commonly pronounced asked. So it's going to sound like this instead, asked. So the K will basically turn into a T. And you can stop that too. Asked. I asked. Um, so that's why I'm kind of surprised that you say you never hear the T, because we usually drop the K, not the T. So I don't know what's going on there, but maybe it's with your listening, or maybe it's they're doing a stop T and you're just not hearing it because it's stopped. I don't know, but lots of good information there. Um, that's how I hear it. You mean like asked sometimes? Okay, yeah. Yeah, remember, English is very dynamic. It's very, very dynamic. So, like that thing I was just telling you, the three consonant sounds together, the fully enunciated word is asked, asked. And so sometimes it'll come out that way. Um, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing saying that you have to drop that middle sound. It's just something that very commonly happens. Um, or maybe dropping the T or whatever it is, stopping the T. I don't know why the T would be dropped there. That seems strange to me, but it's probably stopped. Um, so yeah, in even from the same speaker, one moment you hear them say one thing, and then the exact same word, 5 minutes later, it comes out a little different, and that's okay. If we have more, there's the full enunciation, and then there's things that could happen based on the linking rules or the stress unstress, different conditions that the sounds are in. Um, and the full pronunciation, the fully enunciated sound word is always possible, but then you have all these other possible variables that could apply, and they're likely to apply because we don't always do the fully enunciated form. Um, but you might hear two different things from the same person 5 minutes apart. It's just part of English. And it makes it seem a lot more complicated than it really is. But again, that's why I say I don't want you guys to learn a bunch of rules. I talk about some of the rules, and some of the rules are very, very useful. But you really want to focus on your ears, right? And if you're hearing something a particular way and it's not that way, you're just hearing it that way, then you need to work on your hearing. But if you're hearing something a particular way and it seems weird, well, it could be a regional thing, it could be, all kinds of things. But just remember that English is very dynamic and flowing. So once you have some basic knowledge, of like how to form basic sounds, what are the basic connection rules, this and that, whatever, um, then it's all just about the dynamic flow and trying to actually perceive what is there, not what the rules tell you have to be there. Um, so yeah. Anyway, so that's all I have to say about that. Any follow up? Any other questions? You can leave those. Go ahead and start doing that. See, earlier, Dave, been talking to Sedent. So you tried to take some time off from using technology to clear your thoughts. Yeah, that's a good idea. um, that's probably something everybody should do from time to time. I haven't done that in a long time, so I'm probably due. But, um, yeah, so while we wait for any other questions that Gabriel has, um, or any follow up, let's talk about word order really quick. So word order, word order. So in the most recent lesson I published, and there we are. I struggle to say the word will. There are two ways to pronounce the word like will. I want to learn how to pronounce the other way. Okay, well, let's talk about that. That's a really short one. I'll come back to word order. This is very much true. So the full pronunciation of this word, it's supposed to be with the vowel E on the vowel chart. E. Okay. So that would be wheel. Wheel. It sounds exactly like the word wheel. That's the full, clear, proper pronunciation. This commonly gets reduced to more of the second vowel sound. Now, of course, both of these are, whether it's first vowel or second vowel, they're L colored, and so they're going to sound a little bit different than just the pure vowel sound. But that is a very common thing that happens. It's also the same with heel. That often it becomes hill. Shield very commonly becomes shill, which these are all minimal pairs. But in context, right, if I say she'll do it, obviously I'm saying she will, not she'll. And let's see, he'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. There is possibly another way. We'll do it. With more of like a schwa sound. If you're speaking really unclearly and quickly, like we'll do it, we'll, like whoa, oh. It could become more of a schwa sound, but again, that's very unclear, much faster speech. Possible, but I would focus on mostly on the first two. And you say you want to learn how to pronounce the other way. I assume the other way is the full way, unless there's another way that you learned about somewhere. Because aside from the schwa being a third possibility, I'm not really aware of any other ways to say it. A stupid question. In words like battle and little, the TTLE is pronounced. That's not a stupid question. That is an extremely, extremely good question, and it's something I'm going to make an entire lesson on in the future. Okay. When you see, of course, I mean, there might be some exceptions, but yeah, generally when you see TTLE, or even TLE, like if it's a title, okay, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's two T's. Usually when you repeat a stop sound letter, like T, P, or whatever, it's just spelling. It doesn't affect the sound at all. Not at all in any way, shape, or form. Just spelling. But when you have words like battle, little, title, the pronunciation in American English, okay, in American English, we have a flapped D, because remember the flapped T is, if it's spelled with a T, it doesn't matter. It's the exact same sound as what we call the flapped D, and it's a D sound, so I call it just a flapped D. So it's a flapped D, and that is required for the American sound. Okay, so you need to have that. So it's not a T, right? It's not battle, little, title. If somebody is maybe saying it in a super, super clear or over enunciated way where they're really trying to do something special with it, then maybe they'll push it out as a T. But that's definitely not the way that it normally is pronounced, and that's not the way that it should be pronounced in American English. So, flapped D, that's the first point. As for the rest of it, I think I might have mentioned this very briefly in one lesson previously. What happens when you have this ol at the end? There's three ways that you can look at it, and I think that all three of these ways are perfectly valid, okay? One thing that you guys have to understand about linguistics and certain technical academic things like that is there's, when it comes to like what's going on in the mouth and what sounds are being used, it's not always a 100% exact science. And there are some things, some details where it's kind of gray, it's kind of in between certain things, and there's more than one way to look at it. This is a perfect case. We have three ways to look at this. One, you can look at it as a schwa plus an L, and you will hear people say it that way. Oh, so it's an L colored schwa, okay? Oh. You can also look at it as an L colored high schwa, which is the sound, like book. This is how I commonly do this. Okay, I've noticed that I do it this way. I think it's more of a Western American thing, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, in fact, I never heard anybody doing schwa plus L until a few months ago, because I've been teaching pronunciation for several years now, but really getting down into like the nitty gritty dirty details and answering some of your guys' questions has made me more aware of things than I was. And there's sometimes where I'll be watching a YouTube video and I'll notice that people will use like an L-colored schwa in places where I would use an L-colored high schwa. Um, and they're so close, especially because of the L color, that it does not matter. Like nobody's really going to notice the difference. You're going to sound perfectly fine. Um, so whichever one is easier is fine. But there's a third way to look at this in a case like this, which is a syllabic L. Okay, because we have the dark L, what I call the half L vowel sound, because it is a vowel sound. Ol, where you don't bring your tongue up to the front, you're just using the back part of your tongue. Ol. Now you can't see, but ol. Technically speaking, that's all we really need because whether it's an L-colored schwa, we're going to hear that L. If it's an L-colored high schwa, we're going to hear that L. If it's just a syllabic L, we're going to hear that L. That's really the most important part here. And so it doesn't matter if you add that little extra schwa or high schwa type sound before the L. The important part is the L. So because the sounds between L-colored schwa and L-colored high schwa and just the syllabic dark L or half L vowel sound, because they sound so similar and they're so close to each other, because the L color really obscures or kind of hides the schwa and the high schwa, it really just sounds more like an L. You could describe what's happening here in those three ways. And I think all three ways to describe it are perfectly valid, perfectly fine, no problem. It just depends on your preference. So again, I will use usually more of a L-colored high schwa in a case like this. But if you want to kind of just do a straight half L or do a schwa that's L-colored, you can do that. As long as we hear that L and it doesn't sound like there's some other vowel sound in there, like eel or all or something like that, then that's fine. Battle, 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 battle. Yeah. So very, very good question. Very, very good question. I've been meaning to get around to that. But I will be making a lesson about that in the future and basically everything I just talked about. So good job. Good question. David, by the way, you're welcome. Read my comment on the art video. I'm always happy to share whatever stuff I feel like is relevant to the topic and glad you're coming back to word order. Yes, I will do word order right now. So again, any other questions, leave them in the chat. I'm going to talk about word order first. But yes, word order. Now, in the lesson that I just published about connecting between the R vowel to, or the R vowel sounds to consonants, I talked about smarter and order. And order, we already know this is difficult because you have the at the end, you have the flapped D, and you have to go flap D to That's already hard. And then we have the R colored O, or, which is hard. And then you have to do the R colored O plus a flap D plus an and this is a nightmare. But when we add the word word in front of order, now we have another flapped D because when the D connects to the the R colored O, it's going to become flapped, just like it does when it connects to any consonant or vowel. I can't speak today. And then, of course, you have to do, before that, another R colored O. And then, of course, we'll make it a little more complicated by throwing in the W, which can make it a little harder to coordinate everything as well. So if we say this, right, so we start there, right, word. Okay, we want to close into that D, but we want to kind of try to flap it. And I talked about in that lesson how to sort of go from the to the flap and then, or from the or to the flap and all that stuff. So I won't go into all the details of that again here, but words like ord, I mean like words that have the spelling O-R-D-E. I don't know what you mean there. because orde by itself is not a word. But we go from, we'll ignore the W for a second. Sorry, that's a typo. Oh, okay. So we're going to go from and we have to extend up to the flap D. So just like you would in order, right? You have to do the R-colored O, reach up to try to tap the D, and then you're going to repeat that exact same motion. Or, tap, or, tap, word order, word order, word order. And you can kind of hear that flapping D. It sounds a little more solid because remember, we can't actually freely tap it here. But you can sort of hear the D punctuating the R sounds. Word order, and like dun 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 dun. Additional comment: if you use the classic D sound instead of the flap, would that sound off? I believe so. Yes. If you're very, very clearly enunciating for some reason, I mean, like if I say word order, we're probably going to put a space between the words anyway if we're doing that. But yeah, like if I say order, even then it sounds kind of weird. It's like, why are you saying it that way? But remember, I still, I started making this lesson and I have to redo it because I don't like how it was going. But I've been talking about the range and quality of sounds, and the flapped D is technically just a less enunciated version of the weak D. But if it's between the two vowels, it triggers the flap. And so it should be a flap. If it's not a flap, it's going to start to sound a little bit weird, even if you're enunciating. Oh, wait. Oh, on the lesson. Oh. Oh, I guess you saw one of my other comments, yeah. But yeah, because that's the easy way to do it, right? That's the cop out, we would say. And if in the short term, like if you absolutely have to say order or word order, you have to sort of do this difficult combination. If you really have to just like push out a D instead of a flap D because like you need to use it and it's really difficult to do, you can do that. It's not going to sound natural, but you can do that. It will be understood. But if you want to sound natural, if you really want, to be well, sound natural. I don't know what else I was going to say there. Then you have to really master the flap. You have to master the R's, right? This is where some of the difficult points come together because we already know that the by itself is hard. We know that the R colored vowels are even harder, and we know that the flapped T and D, which is just a flap D sound, are also difficult for many people. And then you put them together in whatever combination, especially where we have three of them, or multiply that word order. It's a nightmare, right? A lot of people call it a nightmare. I think you said that in your comment. It was something like a nightmare. Somebody said it was a nightmare. I don't remember, but yeah, it's ridiculous. So that's one reason why in that lesson I gave you guys the big tip, right? The bonus tip, which is right. First, I told you that instead of doing a normal, like really loose flap D, the tip of the tongue has to be a little bit loose as you sort of extend forward, and you're not going to tap as far forward. It's going to be a little farther back by that point that starts going up in the middle. But the big tip was that instead of using the very tip of your tongue here, you can actually just let the sides kind of tap and have a little opening there. And if you do that, it makes it a lot easier, especially when you have like word order where you have two of them in a row. Because listen to me, I'm going to say these just normally, like in a relatively quick way, right? Word order, word order, word order, word order. Notice first that it doesn't come out exactly the same every single time. Okay, that's one point. It comes out more or less the same. I'm still hitting all the sounds, but the exact quality, sometimes the D is a little more solid, sometimes it's a little looser, right? Word order, word order, word order, word order, word order, word order. Okay. Um, so it's, give or take the same. Um, but you'll notice that most of the time I'm not getting a solid D. And a lot of the time, right, if I say or, that I'm not even using the tip of my tongue. I'm just using the sides of my tongue and tapping there. Order, instead of order. See that you can hear more of a D sound there when I try to tap the tip of it. We won't notice a difference. We really won't. It's close enough because that's actually part of how we speak, to speak faster. So if you use that in this special combination, like word order, that's going to be the easiest way to do it. If you really try to get like all the sounds perfect and everything, it's really hard to say this, even for natives. If I say like word order, I have to kind of like focus on it, and it almost starts to sound kind of weird because I'm kind of trying to do the D a little too solid instead of just trying to freely flap it. So it's a balance. As I told Dave in response to the comment, you need to balance the tenseness of the and the relaxedness of the flap. So, yeah. Can you try to explain the difference? Yeah, see, I need a. I really need to make that lesson. I was going to make a lesson about this as well, and I decided to do a different one on the same type of topic, but I'm going to be making a whole lesson addressing this. I actually talked about this a lot last time. The lesson I'm going to be making for this, I'm going to call it something like the schwa solved or something, because the way that this is taught is unnecessarily complicated. I don't know why people teach it to you the way that it's taught, or the way the information is presented the way that it is. Not that it's wrong necessarily. I just think that it could be done a lot better. So if we talk about this now, on my vowel chart and the way that I teach you guys, again, vowel chart link in the description under my website downloads. What I put on the chart, there's the upside down V, the IPA symbol, and then there's the upside down E, which is the schwa symbol. And I put them in the same spot. The reason I put them in the same spot, technically the schwa is a little higher, the upside down V is a little lower. So I sort of put the spot in the middle. It doesn't matter. The reality of this sound, the reality of the schwa in American English, is that these two symbols, the upside down V and the upside down E, are the same sound. Okay? And they're actually just part of the full range of one sound in American English. I don't know about other languages. I can't speak for British English, but in American English, they're the same thing. They're just the full range of sound. Okay, and good point, Davin. So she or he, sorry. I still don't know. Davin says, isn't the upside down V just the stress version of the schwa? Same sound, just in a syllable that receives the primary stress. Sun, dumb, bump, duck, love. Yes, so I'm going to address this as well. Let's lay out the basics first, okay? It's a very good point. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. So what is called the schwa linguistically is technically it's supposed to be a reduced sound. Okay. Now, if you go from some other sound, like say, I don't know, what's a schwa reduction? To. Okay. So the preposition to, it's the full pronunciation is with the oo vowel sound. Okay. But this usually gets reduced to a schwa and it becomes t. Now, that is a schwa reduction. That is a special use of this sound that is the upside down V / upside down E schwa sound. Okay. There are certain sounds in English that are used as reduction sounds. The is another one. So or is the full pronunciation, but it commonly gets reduced to We don't write it ER, of course, but we say this or that, this or that. That's a special use of the vowel. Okay. But when we're talking about just the upside down V, the upside down E itself as a sound, not as a reduction, but as a sound, um, this is part of the full range of one sound. The schwa, the upside down E, is never stressed. Okay, which I think is a useless detail for you guys, but that's what a lot of people tell you. It's never stressed, which is true. The upside down V can be stressed or it cannot be stressed. Let's see, that's not proper grammar. It can be stressed or it might not be stressed. um, so it doesn't matter. Either way, it could happen. But these sound the same, okay? The upside down V is a little more open, so it's going to sound more like uh, 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 some, bus, okay? Um, the reality of the situation is those words that have the upside down V, okay? If I say them really fast and lazily, like an actual fluid normal speech, okay? They can become, they will become a schwa sound, what is exactly the same as the upside down E, okay? And that's why I don't think it's useful to say like the schwa is never stressed and the upside down V could be stressed or not stressed because they're the full range of one sound. So if I say bus, but I say it really quickly and maybe a little lazily, bus, I'm gonna catch the bus, catch the bus, catch the bus, 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 bus. Okay, it's the schwa sound. It's become an actual actual schwa sound. Um, on the other hand, going the other way, if I take a word that is supposed to have the schwa, um, not as a reduction, just it normally has the schwa, like the word but, okay? Um, if I say that in a very clearly enunciated way, it's going to become the upside down V, okay? But, 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 where normally this is, not stressed, it's said very quickly, but, okay? And so on a scale, on the range of the quality of the sound, we have the full clearly enunciated version. This usually applies to consonants, not to vowels, but this is a special case where you have as the fully enunciated sound. And as you get faster and lazier with your speech, it becomes smaller and quieter into an actual upside down E schwa sound, all the way to the point of possibly disappearing, where it would actually become like a syllabic consonant. So if I were to say bus like really fast and really unclearly, it would basically just be a B and an S. Bus. Let me catch the bus. Catch the bus. 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 Right now, that's an extreme case. If it's a stressed word, it's probably not going to reduce all the way to dropping the vowel sound itself. That would be very, very uncommon, very, very unclear. But in words like but or of, I guess of is kind of special because that also has another detail. But in the word but or the article right, sometimes it could disappear potentially in the sound. So if I say like but, but, I'm really not even say but, but I'm stopping the T there. So it's like B to stop T, but, but no, but no. Um, so I want you to think of these two symbols, the upside down V and the schwa, the upside down E. I call the upside down V the not true schwa because it's the same sound. It is the exact same sound. Slightly different quality, a little more open, a little more enunciated, but it's the same sound in American English. And it's part of the full range of a sound. These two are part of the full range of one sound. So I want you to think about it that way. If for some reason you have to more clearly enunciate or stress or emphasize a word that has the upside down E, the schwa, in which case it's probably not a reduction, right? Because if you're saying, what was the example I gave? I totally forgot. Two. If you're saying two, once you fully enunciate it or you start saying it more clearly and you're not reducing it anymore, or if you stress it for some really special reason here, that full sound is more likely to come out. It doesn't have to, but it's likely to revert or change back into the original vowel sound. So this is not about the reduction part. Okay, we're not talking about the schwa for reductions. We're just talking about the sound that is recognized as the schwa or the upside down V. Not used as a reduction, just the sound itself. They're part of the full range. So if you have to stress it, emphasize it, say it more clearly, and it's a schwa sound, not a reduction, but just a regular schwa sound, then you're going to say more like the upside down V. If you're speaking more quickly and less clearly, like kind of like a native probably would, then it's going to sound closer to the upside down E, the actual schwa sound. I think that's a much better and less confusing way to look at it. But I have to sort of reverse engineer and unteach you guys all of the things that you were taught before. And if you don't like the way I teach it, that's fine. You can just go and learn it the way everybody else teaches you. But I think this way makes a lot more sense and it's a lot simpler. The only reason why it seems complicated is because I have to unteach you the way other people taught you. So the way that I teach this fresh to people who don't know about the schwa, it's a lot less complicated because I just give them the information of how I teach it instead of all the other information about how everybody else teaches it. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, let me know, leave a comment, ask more questions. Let me know if you agree or not, because that's always useful. Or if you think it's confusing, that's good feedback for me, right? Sometimes I have, students or people say like, well, I don't like how you explain that because it's confusing. Most people like it because it's the opposite of confusing, but for some people it's confusing because not everybody fits with the way everybody teaches. And that's okay. But okay, so I'm going to catch up in order here. Gabriel asked the words that finish with ENED, like threatened, shortened, straightened, are difficult to pronounce. All of those also have a T before it, which is probably going to end up being a stop T. The E following N is silenced, and you need to make a nasal sound and then the stop D. Yeah, okay, so as I was saying earlier, right, here we have NED, and it doesn't matter if there's whatever sound is before, okay? If it's NED, as I was saying before, the E is going to be silent. Okay, it's never NID or NED or something like that. Maybe there's a couple special exceptions for that, but it's just going to be a silent E, okay, it's just spelling. And then the D, because N is voiced, all nasal sounds are voiced, the D is going to stay there. It's not going to become a T, right? So we get N, D. The fully enunciated form, you can push out the D, right? If I say threatened, threatened, or shortened, straightened, with a very small weak D. Okay, you don't want to push it out too hard. That is acceptable. That's not the way we normally say it, but that is the fully enunciated form of the word. Notice I'm also actually saying the T there, threatened, threatened, because I'm really clearly enunciating everything. For the, let's see, going from a nasal sound to a stop is actually a lot easier than it seems. And I guess that does kind of depend maybe on your native language, but the thing about the voiced stops, okay, voiced stops are a little harder than voiceless stops. So the voiceless stops we know are p, k, and t. Now those are easy because all you want to do is, if it's a glottal stop, you cut off the air. If it's a held stop, which doesn't really matter, I'm going to be talking about that soon. Either way, you want it to sort of stop without hearing any voice. Okay, so if I say that, 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 and the voice kind of disappears and then goes into that voiceless stop. But if it's a voiced stop, we need to hear the voice through the stop. So as it's stopping, we want to still hear that voice. And we're going to tend to hear that voice either in the throat or through the nose. Okay, not through the nose as in it leaves the nose, but it's going to get stuck in your nose. So, for example, if I say bad and I do a stop there, bad, bad. So the voice continues after the vowel, after I go into the D position, and then you need to sort of catch the voice as you're stopping it. Okay, bad, bad. Now, if it's a held D, you're not going to hear as much of that. You're going to just kind of go into the position. It's going to fade, and it's not as clear. But especially if it's a glottal stop, right? That's bad, bad. You can sort of push out that stop in the nose. Now, if you have a nasal sound, you're already in the nasal, especially if it's N to D, they share the same position. So you're not going to move your tongue, okay? You're just going to touch up here, not on the teeth, up here. So that's the easy part. You stay in the N. And the sound is already going through your nose. And all you want to do is, as you're holding your tongue in the N position, you close it off, okay? So if I say threaten or threaten, threaten, threaten. Well, actually, yeah, that's kind of a weird one. Shortened, shortened. Oh, this is a special case. I didn't notice that. Straightened, straightened, straightened out, straightened out, straightened out. Okay, special case, special case. Let's go back a bit. So from Colombia, present. Yes, hello, Mario from Colombia. Glad to see you here. Thank you for commenting. In a normal entity, it actually might be because of the N. That's cool. Let's see. If we say band, okay, he's part of the band. Band. You hear a little bit of a stop there. Because we're already into the N, as you close it off, we're going to kind of start to hear what would be like a stop D in the nose without needing to actually push that little extra out, okay, because we're already there in the N. But in these cases, and don't worry about the spelling. Yes, there's NED in your questions, but I actually just realized for words like this, for example, if I say he threatened me, okay, and that also has M is also nasal, but I'll also look at some other examples. He threatened me. Threaten me. I'm not doing the D at all. Okay. I'm doing that stop T in the middle, threat, and then I'm saying threat. So I'm just going straight into an N. That's like mountain. That's a special case where we can do the syllabic N. Threaten me. And that's perfectly fine. We know from the context, especially he, right? If it were present tense, it would be he threatens. Okay. But he threatened me. Okay. Or if I say the car straightened out. Okay. So the car is, it's maybe doing this. And to straighten out means like it stops doing that and it starts going straight again. Okay. So maybe you're on ice, you're driving on ice or something. So the car straighten out. Straighten out. I'm actually not connecting the D and saying straightened out, which is possible. That's another way to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can actually say straighten out and connect the N. This is a special case, okay? So when you have, I would say glottal stop T to syllabic N, and then you have the ED ending, which is true in all these cases, you can probably just drop the D altogether. And it won't be a problem. It will not be a problem at all. Special case, very special case. Good question. So that makes it a lot easier for you, right? Where you could just drop the D. And I want to mention really quick a little bit between stop and drop. Stop versus drop. Because obviously we know if it's a dropped sound, there's no D there at all. Okay, there's just no sound. It's dropped. Stop is not a drop. It's where we're doing either a held or a glottal, and we're sort of cutting it off or letting it fade into that position. So it's still there. It's just not pronounced. It's not pushed out. Oh, thank you. A lot of the times it's really hard for me to describe things, and I really hope I'm doing a good job. But thank you for that feedback. Yes, it lets me know I'm on the right track. When it comes to cases like this, where it might be really difficult to keep that stopped D, what natives will commonly do, unless we're enunciating for some reason, like again, if I say threatened, okay, you can push out the D. It's okay. It's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. But we'll commonly just drop it because it's difficult. It's difficult to do. It takes a little more time to push out that D. So in this special case, again, you can't do that all the time. You can't just go dropping random sounds whenever you want. In this special case, where you have glottal stop T, syllabic N, and then an ED ending, probably in every case like that, you should be able to just drop the D. Not a big deal. That's, again, part of the dynamic flow of English and how we make things a little easier for ourselves, which also makes it a little more complicated for you guys trying to learn English, but that's part of the reason why I'm here, trying to help you sort all this stuff out. Okay, good. So we can move on from that. Ariel, hello. Yes, I see your comment now. Thank you for asking a question, and thank you for joining the live stream. Always good to see you. So can you pronounce these really fast? Okay. Yeah, this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard. The only question I would have is the RE. I assume you want me to say re, or is it re? Because I see it's not clear, but I'll just say re. Or actually, since you're a Spanish speaker, you might be thinking RI is E and RE is E. Or I would say RI is the second vowel, I. Anyway, I'm just going to say it. Ra-ra-ri-ru-ru. 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 Really not very clear. Very difficult for me to do. You hear mostly the R sounds, but when English speakers, native speakers, okay, who have no problem normally saying the R, we do occasionally run into problems with R's when they're close together. And if there's also W's close to the R's, not really so much for the R colored R's, because we're putting like the O or the A or whatever it is between the W or the other and the next one, but anytime R's are close together, or if there's also a W in the mix, we can get kind of tongue-tied, even natives. So that's a special case. It can be very difficult. But yeah, ra-ra-ri-ru-ru. Ra-ra-ri-ru-ru. I feel like Scooby-Doo. Now I'm saying re-re, because when I first saw that, I was thinking it like with the flapped R for some reason, like in Spanish. Like I don't even want to do that. I'm going to sound so bad. Yeah, I can't do that. That's even harder. Okay. David, in the catch the bus example. Oh, yes, I remember doing that. You also reduced my favorite vowel sound of all time. Ah. Yes. So I think I talked a bit about that last time. Okay, good. I answered Ariel's question. Thank you. Thank you for the comment and letting me know. Perfect. So moving on. David, I think I talked about this last time and you weren't here, or a couple times ago. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure you weren't here when I talked about it. And I did mention it a bit before because you asked me about it before as well. I don't know if I described it this way. Because you've brought this up, I've kind of been thinking about it more, and I've come to the conclusion, I've started to notice myself, this isn't a regional thing. I've noticed that I do this. I've noticed that my grandpa does this. He's from California. I noticed that my grandma does this. She's from New York. She doesn't really have like a thick New York accent, but now that I'm aware of these things, I notice she does say some things a little bit different. So it seems in my experience that this actually is sort of just an American thing that happens, regardless of region. Maybe not in the South. I don't know. I don't actually know anybody from the South that I talk to regularly. So instead of the full pronunciation of ah, okay, that's the full, clear, nice enunciation. Ah, ah. So if we say cat, well, catch. Remember, catch, I usually say catch with a third vowel, because I'm thinking of that because you said catch the bus, catch. So I'm actually doing the third vowel there, not the fourth vowel. So yes, I'm reducing it maybe in my dialect, but in the way that I'm saying it in Western American English, I don't think it's a reduction. It's just the way we say it. Um, but because you mentioned the reduced I want to mention this. So like cat, right? Instead of saying cat, we could do sort of a lazy way where we don't open the jaw as much, and it's not going to sound as distinct compared to the third vowel, but it will still sound like a fourth vowel. And the trick is that you want your tongue to sort of have more or less the same shape, but you don't have to actually open your mouth as much. And so instead of saying if you say like ah, 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 ah. So it's more about my tongue shape that really makes the fourth vowel. It's not so much the openness. So if I go between, say, bet and bat, but I'm using the sort of like lazy fourth vowel, then it would sound like, so bet, bat, bet, bat, bat, bat. So I'm not saying bat, 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 bet, bat. And that could be harder to hear the difference between. But I've noticed in my own speech that I actually do that very, very frequently. So, and that's in line with everything I've been talking about before. It's like when we're speaking quickly, I think I mentioned this in the main lesson as well. Hello, Zinedine. Sorry, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Zinedine. I'm going to call you Zinedine. I hope that's okay. Hello. What's up? Yes, very nice to see you. Thank you for joining the chat. But yeah, when we're speaking faster for any sound, vowel sounds, consonant sounds, whatever, as we're speaking faster, as we're speaking more lazily, we don't tend to hit certain sounds as accurately. Okay. Now, some sounds there's not a lot of room for movement because it's just maybe it's the same sound. It just doesn't sound like an English quality. But like with the fourth vowel, because it's so open. Also with the fifth vowel a bit, I've noticed. And then of course with consonant sounds like the th, right? Instead of doing the, if I sort of am a little farther back and I'm speaking quickly, that's. I'm actually not saying that's. It's a very, very light th that's almost not there. That's again part of the sort of dynamic range. So it's the same thing. And if I'm confusing anybody, please let me know. David, also, could you also briefly touch upon the pronunciation of this word? Yes. I'm curious if you're doing an in the first place or oo plus Good question. So there's more than one way to pronounce this. The way that I would most naturally commonly say it is I would actually probably use either one, whichever one comes out. But I think more commonly, and the way most people more commonly say them, at least in Western American, would be with just an duress. Duress. And it's not a particularly common word, so we don't use it all the time, but it would just be okay? Duress. I can't do this. Let's see. Duress. Yeah, looks good. Duress. Okay. Now, the other way that I would say it is actually not what you listed at all. The other way that I've heard it pronounced and that I sometimes say it would be dur. And I wouldn't describe that as oo plus I would describe that as y plus vowel. Maybe there's a little bit of an oo in there, like duress, British people would probably change that d into a j, I think, duress, like under duress or something. I don't even know. I don't speak British English. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but you can maybe start getting a little bit of a jit sound. It doesn't matter. The simple way to say it is s. Okay. If you want to add the y, dear, okay, duress. You could do that as well, under duress. No problem. But yeah, I like to keep things simpler for you guys. So, and again, this is another reason why I say a lot of the times the you are ER, IR, UR, are most commonly pronounced just the vowel, just the vowel. I don't care what the IPA says. I don't care what the dictionary says. Sometimes you see like an upside down, or sorry, sometimes you see a schwa symbol plus an R. It's just an okay? Maybe in other parts of the country they do that, but you don't have to do that. I don't do that. It's not a big deal. Just do Now, of course, again, if it's IRE, the silent E will usually change it to IRE instead. UR, sometimes there's a little Y in between. Like cure, you have to say the Y. You can't say cur. That's a different word. But it's not cure, right? I guess you could say it that way. That sounds more of a British pronunciation to me, but cure is just a very common, normal, everyday way to say it. And it's a simpler way because you just have to remember instead of trying to mix in the oo or do something fancy. So there are exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, just focus on the simplest way to say it, which for these spellings is usually just Okay. Comments. We have a very, very good live stream today. We have 12 people here. I don't know who they are. It just tells me there are 12 people here. And I don't think I've ever had, like maybe at some point I've had 12. I don't think I've ever had 12 people at one time. So we're moving up in the world. That's good. Okay, so, how did I say I was going to say your name? Zinedine. I think that was it. Yes. If you don't want me to say it that way, let me know, but I'm just going to say Zinedine. Okay, how to master linking words, vowels with vowels, consonants with vowels, without thinking about it. Fantastic, very, very fantastic question. And we have another question from Forlornness. Thank you for joining the chat here. Any tips to improve intonation, tone, and other parts of the accent? Okay, so two related but different questions. So I'll get to Zinedine's question first, since that's the first one. I'm going to take a bit of a step back, and we're gonna kind of look at the big picture really quick, and then zoom back in. Yes, thank you. As two of them left. No, there's only 10. That's okay. I've noticed that people have been like coming and going for the whole stream, which is normal. So yeah, but anyway, okay. We're going to take first a very macro, big picture view, and then we're going to zoom in on specifically with linking and how to do it without thinking about it. Learning pronunciation in any language has three components, right? It's based on the sound, not so much the written script. It's the sound, and there's the sounds themselves, right? The basic individual sound units. There's the rhythm, intonation, stress, all that for a particular language. And then there is also the linking. Okay, the linking, the flow, the connections, whatever you want to call it, as we're moving between words, but also sometimes inside of a word when you have certain conditions. So that's the big macro view. We have those three big parts. When it comes to any of those three, obviously the basic sounds, you kind of want to do those individually by yourself, well, not by yourself necessarily, but individually first, and sort of make sure you can do each sound, relatively well. And then of course you're looking at syllables, you start bringing in stress, you start bringing in, how things are flowing together. And so there's different entry points of when you can start doing some of the things I'm going to tell you, but we'll just assume that sounds aren't like you already know a lot about the sounds, maybe they're not perfect, because that's generally where you want to start. But after that, I do have a lesson called, which maybe you've seen, I think it's called The 4 General Rules of English Linking or something like that, or English Connections. And that goes into what I call the 4 general rules. And I have another video after that called the 4 big exceptions. Exceptions, quote unquote. They're not actually exceptions. They just seem like exceptions based on the 4 general rules. So the 4 big exceptions to English linking. Okay, so you can look those up if you haven't seen those already. But what I talk about in there, the 4 general rules. First, we have the first general rule in English. This is the most common linking rule of any linking rule in the entire language. Okay, it's the number one most common thing. Okay, well, you definitely want to watch those. I'll give you a little bit of an overview here, and also for other people who haven't seen it. So the first big most common general rule number 1 is consonants always connect to vowels between words. Consonants always connect to vowels between words. And we're focusing on sounds, not spelling. Sometimes you'll see a consonant letter, maybe it's silent, right? Or maybe like if the word starts with O, but it's the word one, that doesn't start with a vowel sound, that starts with the W sound, okay? So we're always focused on sounds, not letters. But consonant sounds will always connect to vowel sounds between words, okay? And it will sound like the consonant sort of leaves the first word and kicks over. Or if it's something like an S, if it's like a bridge sound, like I call it, then it'll sound sort of like it's connected to both. Either way, it doesn't matter. There is a link there, okay? Second general rule, if I remember the exact order here, that would be nice. But second general rule should be vowel sounds don't connect to vowel sounds. They flow into each other, okay? I have a special term called flow. There's linking or connections. I like the word connections. I define that as something special happening, where it sounds like a sound moves over to the next word, or there's a blend between two sounds, something like that. But if there's nothing special that happens and you're just going from one sound to the other and it flows very freely and nicely without an extra sound or something, I call that a flow. Some people don't like that. They think it's confusing. You can ignore that if you want. But an example, if I say saw it, we're going from ah to eh, and there's nothing in between. I just move my tongue into the second position. Saw it. I. Okay. I would call that a flow. It's not a link or a connection because there's nothing special. It just flows into the next sound. Okay. So vowels will flow into each other because vowels are open, but they don't connect. And then the other 2 rules we don't have to care about right now. That's vowel to okay, just really quick. Vowels to consonant. Vowels don't connect to consonants. And consonant to consonant. Some consonants will connect to other consonants. Okay. That's where we get special rules like NT plus vowel or T plus Y becomes ch. All those special rules, they mostly follow under consonant to consonant. Again, watch the main lessons. I lay it out. It'll make everything a lot easier for you. The 4 big exceptions, we don't have to go into all the details, but these deal with vowels. They're exceptions to general rule number 2. So when you have E, I, A, Oi, or I, so these are vowels that end with the E vowel sound or that end with the I vowel sound, because the diphthongs A, Oi, and I, it sounds like they end with E, but they actually end with I, the second vowel on the chart, like it. It doesn't really matter. If you're in that range of E or I, and the next word starts with any other vowel sound, including the same vowel sound, you're going to get a small Y, a small Y sound between them. And that's because of the physical proximity, closeness of the Y sound to the E and I vowel sounds. Okay. Yes, sedent. When is extremely commonly reduced to win. That is the most common way to say that word, win, with the second vowel sound. Very good observation. Yes. So if you're going from O, oo, or ow, which all end in the same, very similar position with the lips coming out towards the W. It's not quite a W, but it's close to the W. And you go to any other vowel, you're going to get a connection with a small W, a small W sound. Okay? It's not a full W, it's a light W. So if I say go over, which this is O to O, it doesn't matter, go over, go over. Now, there is another way to do that. We don't have to care about that right now. If I say, for example, go after, okay, go after. Go. Wow, you hear a little W there. So again, watch the full lessons for that. That's going to give you the information that you need about the general rules and what generally happens in most cases, and it's going to organize it in your brain in a way that's easy to remember. Okay. There are certain other specific connection rules, like I said, NT plus vowel, t and y becomes ch, things like that. I am going to be making more lessons about those rules later. That's all part of the knowledge part, where you're sort of learning what exists in English, what happens in English, okay? Now, the second part of your question is how to do it without thinking. So how to master linking words without thinking about it. And the answer to that is shadowing. I don't know if you know what shadowing is. I have a lesson on that that talks about the basics of it. I'm going to be making a more full, proper lesson on shadowing in the future. And I won't go into all the details of that, but you want to shadow, which is basically where you're mimicking, you're trying to match exactly what you hear, which includes the sounds, the blending or connections, or how sounds are moving between words, and the rhythm, stress, intonation. You can break those into pieces. Like one time you just focus on the rhythm and stress, right? And you don't even say the words. Like, I want to go to the beach. You hear that, you say, or da 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 da, something like that. You're focused on the rhythm, the stress. As you're trying to say it, maybe you notice that you have difficulty saying, I don't know, Goda, right? The T in that special case turns into a flap D. Maybe you can't say that very well. So you have to zoom in, practice that combination, Goda, right? Or Oda. You can drop the G. And once you can say that, you zoom back out. You try to put it back into the flow of the thing. So shadowing, where you zoom in, you zoom out, you can do slower shadowing to faster shadowing, which I think is the best, most effective way to really master everything. And you take it apart in a very scientific way, and you just build pieces up as you go. That's the short answer for that. But shadowing. In fact, if there is any single language learning technique, okay, like if you were learning any language, like say you wanted to learn Japanese, right? Something very, very different than English. You wanted to learn Japanese, and you said, what is the number one best thing that I could do? What is it? Grammar? Is it vocabulary? Is it speaking? Is it pronunciation? What is it? The number one technique, the number one thing that I would recommend to everybody learning any language, if I could only recommend one thing, is to shadow. Don't worry about the grammar. Don't worry about the words. Don't worry about anything. Shadow. If you spend a lot of time really focusing on that, the whole language will unlock for you. That's not necessarily the best way and the easiest way to do it, but if you only used one language learning technique that you could possibly choose and focus on one area of a language, shadowing, okay? And that includes the vowel charts and the micro adjustments and the learning the sounds and all that stuff. It's all part of shadowing. But that is the single most powerful thing. And that connects to forlornness's question. Any tips to improve intonation, tone, and other parts of the accent? Shadowing. Now, specifically for you, you're focused not so much on the sounds themselves, not so much on the linking. And so you really want to focus your ears, make sure that your ears can hear the proper stress, the proper rhythm, the proper intonation, especially at the end of a sentence, how maybe it drops, it rises, whatever it does. And especially in English, because English is a stress-timed language. So we really, really put emphasis and emotion into the words through the way that we say them. Not necessarily based on the sounds themselves, but based on the intonation that we give to certain words, or the way that we do the rhythm. So like I just said, I think it was like, I don't remember what I said, but if I say like, it's really, really good, okay, when I say it that way, I'm really trying to give you my emotion that like, I think this is so amazingly, like I can't quite express it because it's just really good. Okay, there's a certain way I'm doing that. I'm making it long. I'm kind of like trying to like squeeze it through my throat really good. Okay. That tells you, the listener, that I think it's super, super, super amazing, great. Okay. Um, and there are some things that you should learn, that you should study. Okay, this, that, whatever. But mostly, as long as I don't recommend that you do this in isolation, meaning a lot of shadowing, it's not ideal, but you could do like just take an audio of an isolated sentence and shadow it. That's fine. But for the rhythm, the stress, the intonation, um, in particular, it really helps to have a context. So if, say, you're watching a TV show and you take or a movie, and you take the sentence from there that you're going to shadow, you have the bigger context. You kind of can figure out, oh, this person, maybe they're kind of upset, or they're kind of angry, or they're kind of confused, and that is coming through in the way that they're speaking. And so that, and you say, okay, in this context, because that's how you learned your native language, right? You, as a baby, you looked around, you saw how people were, speaking, how they were changing things based on their emotional state, this and that, whatever, and you just absorbed it. Right now, you don't have a baby brain anymore; it's a little bit different, but the basic process is the same. You need to observe, and then you need to mimic. Observe and mimic. Observe and mimic. And try to mimic as accurately as you can. Really pay attention to the details. Okay, listen closely. Don't just assume, because your brain, there's certain sounds you're not going to hear. There's certain stress that you're not going to hear, because your brain is optimized for your native language. You can train your brain to start hearing those things and to be able to reproduce those things, but you have to pay close attention. Okay. I have a student who, he did shadowing. He was very advanced student already. He actually might be here right now. I don't know, but he was already doing shadowing. He's already an advanced speaker, but he was trying to. He still is. He's trying to kind of get rid of his accent, right? Improve his accent a bit. And he already sounds generally pretty good, but he has a little bit of an accent. And I started giving him some more specific techniques, and pointing out certain things as he's practicing. And he said, wow, like, there are things that I'm noticing that I never noticed before. Even though he's an advanced speaker, and even though he did shadowing before, he didn't pay as close attention as he could have. So you really, really, really want to focus not just on what you think you hear, not just on what your brain tells you is there. Really focus on what is actually there. And that can be hard sometimes. It could take some time. I will be making lessons in the future talking more about intonation and stress and rhythm. I do have one lesson, well, two lessons, which is funny because one is called the only stress. I think it's called like the only English stress lesson you need or something. That's the main one. The one before it introduces you to the basic general rules of English stress, just the actual useful ones, not all the minor ones that really are not useful at all for you, because you can learn to hear those naturally. But that big main lesson, it's just like you see the word on the screen, it's separated by syllable, you can see the stress in the capital letters, and you just hear me say it. Okay. And it's just like a bunch of words with many different types of patterns and different things. And if you go over that and you watch that whole thing a few different times, your brain is going to start to adapt to the stress of English. It's almost guaranteed for the average learner. But anyway, I hope that answers your question for Lornas. I see I have more comments. I don't know if you said anything else. Okay, I notice all of that, but I sometimes don't have the time to observe it in a conversation with someone. Also, how can I improve my ah sound? I've been trying to use your guides and ask my friend how to start. Okay, so here's the thing: what people have to realize. Pronunciation is not improved in conversation. Okay. Now, obviously, it's tied. And yes, when you're speaking, you are kind of practicing this and that, but you're focusing on communication. Okay. Your grammar is improved through conversation. You do have to study a little bit outside, but well, you don't have to, but that helps. but it's when you're trying to communicate that's, you need to know how to put words together. Your brain can only handle so much. So even if you're just listening to somebody and you're trying to notice things, for me as a native speaker, right, there are times, because I like language and because I like sounds, there are times when somebody's been talking to me and I start focusing on how they sound, not on what they're actually saying to me, and I completely miss what they're telling me. Like I have to have them repeat because I wasn't listening, because I'm listening to how they sound, how they're actually producing the words. So your brain can only focus on one at a time. Okay. Um, so when you're in a conversation with somebody, be in a conversation with somebody. Okay. Your observation and your improvement in your mouth, that is going to happen outside of conversation. Okay. Um, and you need to be playing with sounds, playing with stress, playing with intonation, playing with all this stuff as much as you can when you're not in a conversation, just like you did as a baby. All those little baby sounds that you made, they weren't just random sounds. You were training your mouth and your ears based on what you were hearing around you that your parents or whoever was saying. You have to do the same process again. It's not that complicated. It's not some big mystery thing. You just play with the sounds, pay very close attention, and put in the work. Some things are a little harder than others. Some sounds are very difficult. That's okay. Um, but it's a pretty simple process. Okay, you just have to actually put in the work. And when you run into difficulties, like how to say the ah sound, that's when you need a little extra time, a little extra feedback, and some patience, because some sounds will take you longer to learn than others. That's okay. Um, how can I improve my ah sound? So okay, so you said that, so you've seen my lessons where I talk about it, and you asked your friends to help you, and you still have the wrong sound. Well, um, hmm. I'm going to process that in the back of my brain. And I'm going to come back to that because that's technically a separate question. And we have lots of other questions. So I'm going to come back to you. What I will say between now and when I come back to it, um, if you have any other details, or if you want to explain maybe like how your tongue feels or this or that, any other information you can give me that I can maybe work with would help. So maybe think about that for a second. Okay. Going back up, so Jean, thank you for the comment, Jean. How to distinguish? I know it's been a while. Oh, actually, no, Jean. Sorry. So many questions today, guys. So many questions. It's good. It's very good. Steve, yes. Suggestion for a video. A video. Yes. It's a typo. Explain the meaning of prepositions and phrasal verbs. It's hard for me to learn phrasal verbs like any other word. Okay, so well, I do have. I don't know if you saw. I have the logic of the preposition on. And I have one specific lesson for that. One is the main lesson, and the second or third one, I forget, because I'm pretty sure I have three for on, talks about how the logic applies in several different phrasal verbs with on. I didn't talk too much about that with of, because of actually isn't really used in phrasal verbs. It's used more like a connector between the phrasal verb and the object. But yes, as I probably mentioned before, I have been focusing mostly on the pronunciation and trying to get the pronunciation course done, or at least the main part of it done. And I also have a lot of other things going on at this point. So you guys probably noticed I didn't upload for like a week. Sorry about that. I'm definitely going to try to do at least one video a week, if nothing else. Hopefully more, but at least one a week, if nothing else. So I can only do so much at a time. When I start making more money, I want to hire an editor, and that's going to be able to make. It's going to allow me to do more content because I don't have to edit. The editing takes me forever. Absolutely, it's horrible. Partially because of my computer, but I have a book, The Logic of Prepositions. which talks about phrasal verbs and all this stuff, and how the phrasal verbs exist because of the logic and how it applies in all these different cases, and blah, 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 blah. You don't have to buy the book. I'm not saying that. I'm going to be turning the whole thing into a free course right here on YouTube, but it takes me forever to make those videos because I need to do lots of image overlays, and they're super long videos, and so I haven't gotten there yet. I sort of put that on the back burner, but I am definitely going to be talking about prepositions, the logic of prepositions, phrasal verbs. I have a few videos about the idiom of the week, which I temporarily stopped doing because I'm focusing on pronunciation. And in some of those, I also talked about the logic of prepositions there as well. They're not necessarily phrasal verbs, but you know, um, if you can understand the logic and feel logic, because it's just a logical approach to build the feeling for that native speakers have for a preposition. If you can start to feel the preposition, the phrasal verbs will come naturally. I tested that on several students when I was figuring out the details for what the logic of each preposition is, as I was trying to discover what the logic is, because it's actually a discovery. I know people disagree with me on that, but I feel very firmly it's a discovery. It's not something that I put together and created. This is something that exists as part of the personality of the English language, and other languages have similar things. There's logic of Spanish prepositions, logic of German prepositions. German is what gave me the idea in the first place. But that aside, there were several students that I tested that on as I was trying to figure out the details, and they started to spontaneously use phrasal verbs correctly that they had never learned before. They'd never seen them before. They weren't always correct. They were. It was a good idea. It was a good try, right? There is sort of certain things that English just doesn't like, and it won't work, even though it's logical. But they started to spontaneously use real phrasal verbs correctly that they had never heard before. So the phrasal verbs are a consequence of feeling the preposition itself and how the preposition is used and what it means in the language. And then you combine that with certain verbs and you get certain new meanings. It's it's very simple. But of course, there's lots of phrasal verbs, and if you don't know how they feel, it's not so simple. It's very frustrating and difficult. So more on that in the future. That will be coming. Okay, Gene, how to distinguish words with schwa and words with a cup, cup, luck, luck. Wait, what? How to distinguish words with? Oh, I see. You're thinking of like the IPA symbol, so like right, the fifth vowel. That's a common question. A very, very common question. And make sure I'm not missing any follow up here. Okay. Now we're so behind. This is an extremely productive live stream. So the single best way that I know, it's not always enough, but usually it does the trick. Single best way I know to distinguish between sounds is to use minimal pairs, which these are minimal pairs: cup, cop, luck, lock. Now there's your production of them and there's your perception of them. I have a lesson, which maybe you already saw it, I don't know, talking about the schwa versus ah. Now remember, when I say the schwa, I don't just mean that reduced upside down E symbol. Okay, I'm talking about the upside down V and the upside down E. So cup and luck is the upside down V, but I refer to it also as the schwa because it's the same sound. Okay, it's just a more clearly enunciated version of sound, and a little more open. So that lesson is called like schwa versus ah or something like that. So if you haven't seen that, that's where I would tell you to start. I do still have plans. I don't know when. I do still have plans to write a software program for training your ears, minimal pair trainer. Because when you watch my videos, you can only get so much practice. Because if you rewatch it, you'll start memorizing the answers. And that's right. Um, so hopefully I can provide a solution to that. But in the meantime, do that, and then I mean it's observing. It's if you can start to feel it in your mouth, that can also help your ears. It goes both ways. Usually, being able to hear it, you need to be able to produce it. But there are cases where people can produce it and they can't really hear it very well. It's a strange thing. The brain is a very strange thing. Um, but either way, even if you can't hear it or produce it, if you can start to kind of figure out how the difference feels in your mouth, ah, 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 and what's going on with your tongue, not just opening your mouth more, but actually how your tongue feels, can actually help your ears start to perceive the difference. Um, so I would also work on trying to actually produce the difference because that's going to help your ears. But it's a big mess. For difficult sounds like this, especially when you can't hear the difference very well. Um, the best thing you can do is get feedback. Okay, use minimal pairs. Those are the tools you need to spend time, but you're going to have to get feedback. And I play with students I've worked with. I played a lot what I call the 1-2 game, which is what the minimal pair lessons are based on. And so whatever the two sounds are, right? If it's ah and I would say one of the words and they'd have to guess, just like in the lesson. Except now, because it's not a recorded video, I can speed it up, I can slow it down, I can, reset the answer, I can do 5 times, and they don't know if I'm changing it or not. So it's a better test live. But of course, you need to get feedback for how you sound. And so work with a tutor for that. You can go to italki, find a cheap tutor who's a native speaker, or if you have the time, you can find a language exchange partner who is learning your language for free. The tutors are not free, but the language exchange partners are free on italki. And, that's what you got to do. If you join my Patreon for the $30 a month option, if it's not the $30 a month option, I can still check a recording here and there if you send me a recording, but the $30 a month option, I'm allowing you to send me like 2 or 3 recordings. It could be sounds, sentences, it doesn't matter. 2 or 3 recordings a month. I might make that 4 recordings a month, once a week. But and you can get direct feedback from me, and I can give you detailed, things for your production. But for your ears, obviously, like I don't know if you're hearing it or not. You know that. Okay. Gabriel asks, make sure there's no follow-up there. Okay, yeah. Gabriel asks, crew and cruel, eagle and ego. Okay, good question. So crew and cruel, these two are exactly the same, except the second one with the L is L colored. It's an L colored ooh. Now, when we say cruel, you probably notice that's not the first way I said it. I said cruel. So there's actually 2 ways to say that. You can do an L colored ooh, cruel, kind of like cool, but with an in front of it, cruel. Or you can actually kind of do it a little bit of a lazier way, where we say with a little bit of like a schwa between the ooh and the ol, and it becomes an L colored schwa. Cruel. That might be a little easier to do, but in that word you can do that. So crew. Okay, there's no L. Don't do the half L. Don't do anything. No L sound. Okay, it's just ooh, spelled EW, but it's ooh, the ooh vowel. Okay, crew, and then cruel, or cruel, or you do sort of like a schwa, or it could be a high schwa. It doesn't matter as long as you can put a little space between the ooh and the half L. That's fine. With eagle and ego, this is not quite the same type of pair, although it might sound very similar. Eagle, that, like we said before, I forget the word we were talking about. Oh, like battle. I think it was Steve. I think Steve asked a question about like with battle and little, and I was talking about how that L there, it could be an L colored schwa, an L colored high schwa, or it could be a syllabic L. When we say eagle, it's the same exact type of case. We're going from g, and you can put a schwa, you can put a high schwa, or you can go straight into that half L. Three different ways to look at it. It doesn't really matter. Do whichever one works best for you, whichever is easiest. Eagle, eagle. If I try to do all three, schwa, eagle, eagle. Right, sound a little more open. I would never do it that way, but I know I've heard other people do it that way. High schwa, which is but L colored. Eagle, eagle, eagle. Okay. And then just a syllabic L, eagle, eagle, eagle. I'm just kind of going straight from g into that sound. They sound almost exactly the same. Doesn't really matter. This next word is ego, which is an O sound. And if we were to L color that, that would be eagle, eagle. You might hear some people say eagle like eagle with like an L colored O. I think maybe I've heard some people say that, but I don't think that's a common way to say it. I don't think most people say it that way. So I wouldn't call that the same type of pair. So yeah, I hope that answers your question there. Zinedine, okay, I already got to that. David, do you think, as a fellow language learner, that it's actually feasible to get to a point in a second, third, whatever language where you can speak with an ease comparable to, very nice use of the article there. I was going to say no article, but yes, with an ease comparable to your first language. Very nice grammar, very nice. Where it feels effortless and the movement of the tongue is no longer something that you think about while speaking. Okay. Yes, I know it's taken me a while to kind of get here, so I appreciate your patience. I think I need to figure out how to explain things a little more concisely and not go off on tangents. That's kind of a problem I have, but I also need to drink more. Do I think that it's feasible? Yes. Now, some people, they have speech impediments in their own language. And I don't think it's impossible for them to fix that, but some people are fine with that. Like, they can't say the R very well, they can't say the L very well, even though they're a native speaker, and they speak a little differently than other people. That's okay. That's okay. People who have natural speech impediments, even in their native language, to then master and sound like a native in a second language might not be possible. Because they seem to have maybe sort of like an extra handicap that the average person who just speaks their native language perfectly fine doesn't necessarily have. So there might be some cases, some people's brains are just a little bit different, where when it comes to fully mastering all the sounds, maybe it's not possible for them. Does that mean that they can't still sound really, really good and master most of the sounds? No, you can still get super, super far regardless. Like, as long as you can speak a language, it doesn't matter, right? You can learn another language. I don't care if you don't have the language gene or talent. That is completely irrelevant. And that's a different discussion. But to master and sound like a native, I think for most people at any age also is not a very big factor, unless you have Alzheimer's or something, then whatever. But age is not as big of a factor as most people think. It's one of the things that bugs me. I'm too old to learn the guitar. I'm too old to learn how to program. No, you're not. That's such a big myth, and it really angers me. But aside from that, almost any person at almost any age learning almost any language, I don't care if it's English to Japanese, whatever, it could be completely different, can potentially master and sound either completely native-like or near native-like. Period. Okay? The only thing is, and this is going to vary from person to person, if you have a natural talent, obviously it's going to be a bit easier. It's going to be a bit faster. Okay? If you don't have a natural talent, but you speak your native language perfectly fine, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer, right? Talent, in my experience, my research, and I've done a lot of research on learning and all this stuff. I'm interested in all these types of things. Read the book The Talent Code if you want to learn more about what talent actually is. But talent is essentially just a head start. Okay. Somebody with talent can probably go farther, like as an ultimate end, like how far can you get, compared to somebody who doesn't have the talent for something. But if somebody with talent, say, didn't do a lot of effort or didn't do any effort for that particular thing, and they just never spend time with it, say like the piano, but you never play the piano, versus somebody who has no talent for the piano and they practice every day consistently and put in a ton of work and effort, that person with no talent is going to get so much farther, and you can get to a really, really good level in a relatively short period of time. People think, oh, like it takes 20 years to become like an expert level. You can do a lot at the intermediate level. To the untrained eye and ear in any skill, the upper intermediate level of that skill seems like an expert, and most people don't realize that. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent again. um, More specifically, you're saying with an ease comparable to your first language. So not just where like, okay, yeah, maybe you can kind of sound native like, but you really have to focus on it, right? Can you speak as effortlessly and perfectly, um, as naturally as you do in your native language? The only thing is, it takes a lot of work. Okay, there's no getting around that. Even for somebody who has talent, it's not going to take as much work. It's going to take a lot of work. That's the only thing. And for some people, it is worth the work. For whatever reason. Maybe they're trying to take on a new identity. Like I've had some students who they're living in the United States. They came from wherever, and they love American culture. They want to become American citizens and like develop this new like English speaking identity, sound like a native, all this stuff. And that's fine. Some people have that goal. Other people, they just want to be understood, and they really don't care about pronunciation. It's just an extra burden, something that they have to learn that they don't want to learn. So if that's how you feel, then it doesn't matter, right? Just focus on being understood. That's fine. But the key here, aside from the fact that it's going to take some time, it's going to take work. The higher you want to go, the more work you're going to have to put in. That's also true for technically for grammar, although grammar is pretty finite. It's not so bad. But vocabulary, right? Constantly trying to improve your vocabulary. I don't know all the words in English. Nobody knows all the words in English. There's always more words I can learn. So you reach, the higher you go with something, the more you reach diminishing returns, right? It's the law of diminishing returns. And so you make smaller and smaller gains as you go higher and higher. But the in addition to all the work, the key is the shadowing. Again, the shadowing, the shadowing, the shadowing, the shadowing, the shadowing. And part of that is the very close observation of things. So when you do, this is why I talk about slow to fast shadowing. Okay, slow to fast shadowing, because if you're doing regular shadowing, like I've seen some other videos from other teachers, because some of my students were like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Um, and I've seen these shadowing lessons from other teachers on YouTube where all they're doing is like they might have the text on the screen, and they're like saying, like they'll say, a sentence or part of a sentence or whatever. And you, the learner, are supposed to just like try to repeat after them. And then they go on to the next sentence. And then they go on to the next sentence. And then they go on to the next sentence. There's like really no analysis. Maybe there's a couple points they talk about, but there's no analysis. They don't tell you, oh, there's the rhythm, which is distinct from the sound, which is distinct from the linking. And you have to take all of these into consideration and put them together. There's no speed variable, right? They're just trying to get you to speak nice and clearly. It's a very shallow, weak form of mimicking. Okay, it's not what I would call real shadowing. Is it better than nothing? Yes, but that's not going to make you sound like a native. Okay, if you do real, I don't want to call it proper because there's more than one way to shadow, but if you do real substantial shadowing, where you're really going into it, you're really observing, you're really trying to match everything, and you add in the slow to fast element. The slow part allows you to slow everything down, really hear what's going on, and try to slowly feel as you go from this sound to that sound to that sound in your mouth. How does it feel? Do I have to make a little change? Because maybe the sound is good, but the connection between them, the flow, in your mouth, maybe you're doing something a little weird and it doesn't sound right. Sometimes details like that won't matter, But and this might seem way too detailed for some people, but if you really want to master the sound and sound natural, there's some knowledge you have to have. But it comes down to shadowing. You start off slow, really try to match as much as you can, right? The what things that are difficult, you isolate them, you really focus on them, you drill them, you play with them a lot, do micro adjustments, zoom back out, start putting the pieces back together, make sure that you can do everything at that speed. And then once you can say it all at that slower speed, you speed it up a little, and you speed it up a little, and you speed it up a little. And every time you speed it up, if you reach another point where you can't, either it's difficult for you or you just don't quite sound the way that the recording or the person sounds, then you have to again zoom back in at that speed and figure out what's going on. Again, it's not a complicated process. It has a lot of moving parts, but it's pretty straightforward. You're just going in, you're dissecting the pieces, and you're trying to put them together in your mouth in a way that allows you to go to build up to a faster speed. And through that process, I can almost guarantee you that, yes, it will become effortless. Okay. But you have to put in the work, and you have to do the right things. So I haven't quite gotten that far on the channel yet. I've been talking a lot about basic sounds and stuff. So yeah, we're gonna get there. I'm gonna be making lessons on that in the future as well. Like there's literally, as I said before, there's like hundreds of lesson ideas I have, and I can only do so much. So okay, and you mentioned that I hear that many African American speech who do the same thing pretty much anytime E comes before N. Yeah, so I don't know about for African American speech. Talking about, because Cedant mentioned pronouncing when as win, which is a very, very common natural thing that we do almost all the time. Just like than, THAN, almost always gets produced then, the name is THEN. It's a very common everyday reduction that everybody uses. There is actually something called the pin-pen merger, right? I've told you guys about the cot-cot merger, which is where the ah and aw become ah, just one sound. And that's what I teach you because it's easier and still very natural. And that's how I speak. The pin-pen merger is a feature that some Western American speakers have. I don't know about African Americans specifically, because obviously there are African Americans all over the country. Maybe it's part of, I think guess I would be under Ebonics. I don't know. I'm not a linguist. But anyway, there are some people, like I think up around like the middle of California, and in part of Southern California, where it comes because of, I think it was a migration of people from the Midwest to the West. I don't remember exactly what it was. It's a special group that they started saying as eh, or no, yeah, as is. So they'll say, "Can you give me a pin?" instead of a pen. Can you give me a pin? And that happens sometimes. But outside of that, there are certain words like when, which just commonly reduce to win for just the average speaker in general. It's not a regional thing. I don't say pen as pin. It's pen. So, okay. I know shadowing. Okay, good. I guess that was a follow-up for whatever I was talking about before. Well, good. Then shadow. I mentioned a lot about shadowing today. I apologize if I'm spamming in the chat with too many questions. I mean, no, that's fine. I'm just too slow answering the questions. That's the problem. Apologize if I'm spamming the chat with too many questions, but would you say the flap in later and the one in party are not exactly the same, even if you have a flap plus an in both? Later, party. No, they're not the same. And there's a specific they're both flap Ds, and we would recognize them as a flapped D. We wouldn't make a distinction, but the physical mechanics and the actual quality is different. The reason is because one is flap D plus ER, which is where we're going to do, again, it's going to be a little farther back, like I talked about in that recent lesson, and we're going to tap and pull. That's how I describe it, tap and pull. Usually the flap D is just like this. I mean, it depends on what the next sound is, but it's very loose, where this is tap and pull, tap and pull, tap and pull, later, later, water, better, okay? Where when we do party, now you have to go to E, and not only that, but you're going from R. So now instead of going here to you're going from forward into E. So you have to tap and push, party, party. So I'm going up with my tongue, tapping, and then pushing forward into the So it's actually a reverse motion, but they're both flaps. They're both flaps. It's just the physical mechanics are different. Okay, Veronica. Hello, Veronica. I've never seen you in the chat before, so thank you for joining us. I know it's been a little while trying to get to everybody's questions, so I apologize it took so long. Wanted to thank you for this class. You're welcome. And ask 3 questions. 1, pronunciation of fears and fierce. Very good question. 2, pronunciation of silent omitted T in mountain center general. Okay, we'll talk about that. How do you pronounce organ? Okay, so first one, easy one. Fears and fierce. The difference is in the last sound. Fears is spelled with an S, but it's pronounced with a Z, which very commonly happens. You really have to listen, okay? Sometimes the S at the end is an S, sometimes it's a Z. You have to listen. Fierce, spelled with a C, and we know that C can represent the S sound. The E is silent at the end, but that is actually an S sound. So the only difference between the two, even though the spelling is very different, is that final sound. One is a Z, one is an S, okay? The first one is a Z, the second one is an S, to be specific. Number 2, pronunciation of the silent omitted T. Okay, this is not silent or omitted. It is not silent or omitted. Let's talk about that. At least the way that I teach it. So, and the way that I speak. We have mountain, center, and gentle. I'm fully enunciating the words. Mountain, center, gentle. That's okay. Not the most common way we say them, but mountain, center. Okay, so let's talk about these really quick. Mountain, we will very commonly do not a silent dropped or omitted T. It's not mountain, mountain. That's not right, right? That would be an omitted T where it's silent. We would do what's called a stopped T. Maybe it's a terminology. Maybe it's a terminology thing, and other people say it's omitted or silent or whatever. I don't know, but it's a stop T. Specifically, it's a glottal stop T. Mountain. Okay, and then we do a syllabic N. You can do the I, the second vowel sound on my vowel chart. I, like it. Mountain. That's fine. That's another variation. But it's a glottal stop T. You could technically do a held stop T instead of a glottal stop T. It's not as clear, it's not as common, but in fast speech, you might hear that. With center, okay, this one is not a stop, okay? We don't say center or center, okay? This one is omitted, okay? This one is completely dropped. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. There is a connection rule or a linking rule in English that I like to call NP plus vowel. Now, this will pretty much always happen between words. Like if I say want out, instead of connecting the T, what we most commonly do, not 100% of the time, but most commonly, we're going to drop the T, we're going to connect the N, and we're going to say want out. I want out. Okay? So it's going to be like want out. And technically there's a glottal stop T at the end. Both of these would be stressed. The one out. The out would be the primary stress there. Now, the NT plus vowel rule can also apply inside of a word. It doesn't always work, but it still pretty frequently does happen. Like in the word interest, we can say, instead of interest, we can say interest or interesting. Okay, that's another way to say the word. But with center, the most common way to say this, by far, this word is almost always pronounced center. No T at all. The T just disappears. And it's because of the NT plus vowel rule, because remember, is a consonant and a vowel. Okay, in this case, it's a vowel. Then with gentle, okay, this one also is a drop T. Gentle, gentle. And in this case, we're going to go from the N. It's the same rule, actually, because you see the L and you think, well, that's not NT plus vowel, but it is. This is another reason why I say that the dark L, what I call the half L vowel sound, is a vowel, because it is a vowel. Some people say it's vowel-like. No, it's a vowel, okay? And we're seeing it happen here, NT plus vowel, okay? Because we have the gent plus the ul, okay? And again, you could describe that as the schwa, L-colored schwa, L-colored high schwa, or just a syllabic L. It doesn't matter. Any of those are perfectly accurate descriptions. But in all cases, we have a vowel sound after the T, the NT, and so the T in this particular word can also disappear. Gentle, gentle. So yes, in that first word, mountain is not dropped. We don't say mountain, mountain. That does not work. Nobody, I don't think anybody would ever say that. Okay. And then you had another question. How do you pronounce organization? Mostly the syllable ne and I. Okay, I've heard some people pronounce ne as schwa and others as regular. I don't know if you mean lowercase I as an IPA or as an I, because I would never say organization. Organization. Like that sounds very, very strange. So I assume you mean the second vowel, organization. This is a very excellent question. I don't know exactly why. It might be influence of Western American. So you can say it both ways. You can say organa, na with a schwa. That's fine. There's no problem there. It's a very common way to say that. It's probably the most common way to say it. I will also commonly say organe. I use either one. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I think, I haven't verified this, I think in Western American, which again is under the umbrella of General American, okay, it's not, it's still neutral. It still counts as neutral. It's not that different. Linguistically, it's fine. So, but I think in Western American, my hypothesis is that some of the times where we have a schwa reduction, we can also have an I reduction, because based on how I speak, I will either just reduce it into I, the second vowel, or I will use both I and the schwa, as the reduction sound very naturally. Some words you can't do that. That's the unfortunate point. It's not like a 100% thing, but many, 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 many words that reduce to a schwa, especially if it's like a big long word, if it's written with the letter I, many times it will be also reducible to I, or that could be the full pronunciation. In this case, it's for organize, the verb, it's I, organize. But for the noun, organization, organi. It's not organization. Well, actually, no, sorry. Okay, organization as in like a government organization or something. That's organization. Let's see, organization. I guess you could say I too. Yeah, that works too. But when we're talking about organization as in, oh no, they both work. See, there are things that I realize all the time. Okay, so you can also say organization. That's fine. So there's three ways to say this. Yes, you could do the diphthong I as well. See, as a native speaker, there are things that I'm not conscious of that you guys ask me questions, and I'm like, wait, that's right. That's true. We could do that too. So, long story short, the ni syllable in this word could be pronounced ni, na, or nai. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay. Yes, and then okay, for learn this. So I know you left another comment here. Okay, so well, we have Seedent. Wow, the stream is getting very interesting now that we have so many people. Thank you all. Yes, thank you all indeed. Good comment, Seedent. Okay, so I want to. Okay, should I avoid reading if I want to master linking? Should I listen to native speakers through TikToks, live streams, TV shows instead? What you practice is what improves. The number one golden rule of all skill development. What you practice is what improves. Um, Now, of course, there's different ways to practice things. Some are better than others, but what you practice is what improves. So, in other words, what you focus on is what will improve. So, if many people make the mistake, for example, of saying, I want to learn a language, and they study a bunch of grammar and vocabulary, thinking that they'll be able to speak it someday. And it doesn't work that way because speaking is a skill that you have to actually practice. Um, so, if you're trying to master linking, should you avoid reading? If your primary goal, especially if it's a short-term, very focused goal, say like a week, a month, 3 months, it's very good to set missions and focus on just like one or two things that you really want to improve in a short period of time. It also helps with your motivation and staying on track, on topic. But um, it's ultimately based around your goals. Should you avoid reading forever? No, of course not. But if you want to master linking and if you want to do it in a shorter period of time, reading, if you're reading with audio and you're using it just as the visual supplement for what you're trying to shadow and maybe observe based on like how people speak and stuff, um, then you can still keep the written word in it. But straight reading where you're not listening to anything, um, that's not going to help you master linking. In fact, it's going to, if anything, it might help push you in the opposite direction because you have a voice in your head when you read. We aren't usually conscious of it, but there's a voice in your head. And that voice in your head is going to have your accent. um, which isn't the end of the world. It's not the worst thing in the world. But if you're trying to master linking and you're hearing your own voice and your own accent in your head, that's not going to help you, right? Um, so should you listen to native speakers through TikToks, live streams, TV shows instead? Yes, 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 yes. Try to focus on things that you're interested in, of course. Don't just, watch something because it's English. And I particularly recommend finding, TV shows that have multiple seasons, like Friends, that you are very, very interested in and focus on that because you're going to get very into it. Um, Obviously, if you're focusing on linking, you don't want to just enjoy it. You also want to really notice what the sounds are and not just what they're communicating. So it's a little bit different than straight listening practice. Um, but yes, you need lots and lots of audio input. Audio input. Um, However, to master linking, to master pronunciation and ear training are mechanical. Okay. You may have seen in the background of some of my recent videos, I have this upside down pyramid. Um, and I put it upside down for a reason. The bottom point is the fundamental unit of the skill. In language learning, in spoken language, that fundamental unit is sound. And there's the physical mechanics of perceiving the sound with your ears and the physical mechanics of producing the sound with your mouth, which might also include your throat, your lips, whatever. Okay. Um, when we're talking about linking basic sounds, rhythm, stress, intonation, those are all mechanical. Okay, they're sort of in a special category. And if you're practicing listening, but you're not focusing on the mechanical aspect of really trying to observe specifically what is being heard or trying to mechanically reproduce what you're hearing, then it's not quite the same. It's still going to be beneficial and it's going to help your listening, but it's not necessarily going to give you the most benefit for your production of the language. Okay. That's why I say shadowing is the best thing because shadowing is like shadowing, the micro adjustments, the vowel charts, all these things are at this bottom point level of the physical mechanical mastery that you have to have in a language if you want to sound natural, if you want to master linking and sounds and all this stuff. So it's a little bit different than the other skills, speaking, reading, writing, listening, because it's that foundational element that is underneath the actual speaking and listening itself, right? I hope that makes sense. So yes, listen, but pay very close attention to what you're listening and try to do exercises where you're really intensively focusing on a small piece rather than just a lot of input. And mix it up, have fun, don't burn yourself out. It's a process. But you do need that really focus zoom in time. Okay, so for learn this, yeah, I've been using it for a month or more. Both mobile pairs help me distinguish the sounds and the additional practice. The thing is, I hear, sorry, it took so long for learn this. The thing is, I hear what it sounds like, definitely different than me, but can't do it. Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point to be. If you can hear the difference, but you can't produce the difference, that is so much better than not being able to hear the difference at all, right? So let's acknowledge that first, because I've had a lot of students where they say, I can hear the difference, but I can't produce the difference. And they get really upset. And it is upsetting. I know it's frustrating, but recognize the win first, okay? If you can't hear it, it's a lot harder to try to reproduce it. If you can hear it, we're one step closer to being able to reproduce it. Okay. And I also see you said Josh's middle of pairs, yeah, definitely, short for definitely. Very nice. Definitely helped me. Still bad, but a big improvement after using them. Oh yeah, I see, because David asked you a thing. Okay, so this is where micro adjustments come into the picture. And I don't know if you've seen that video where I talk about micro adjustments. It was a repost from TikTok, but it's on my YouTube channel. So watch that if you haven't. But basically, micro adjustments, that is the key to not only mastering the flow and the linking, but especially for the basic sounds. Because, and most especially for vowel sounds, because the good thing about consonants, aside from the fact that many languages share either exactly the same or almost exactly the same consonants, the quality might be a little different, but basically the same sound. English has many vowels, and consonants tend to either touch something or come close to touching something, where the only vowel that really comes close to touching something, I think, is E, because it's so high up in the front. But even then, there's some space there. Vowels are very open and I don't mean open mouth necessarily, but they don't really come close to touching much in the mouth, aside from maybe the teeth, the bottom teeth. And so it makes them extra difficult, because you have to figure out, okay, where in this space do I put my tongue, and how exactly should I hold my tongue in order to reproduce the sound? So you need to make micro adjustments. If you can hear the difference, then you can probably do micro adjustments by yourself and be able to get the sound, okay? No guarantees there, but that usually helps a lot. I do recommend, especially if you try micro adjustments, this and that, whatever, you still have trouble, work with a teacher. If you want, I don't know where you would send this. Because I like to do, obviously, I can't help everybody all the time. If you join my Patreon, I can definitely give you some feedback on recordings. If you don't join my Patreon, you just want help with this one little thing, this one time, you can maybe send me a recording to my email, which you can find in the About tab of my channel. And I can give you some feedback based on what I hear for how you can make adjustments. But when you're making micro adjustments, so we're talking about the fifth vowel, so it's going to be more open. We're using the back of the tongue. Okay, so we need to know that. The tongue is going to be kind of like this. You want the sound to be more on the back, but there's sort of like a slope to it. That's how it feels in my mouth. Saw. You might have to maybe push the back down just a little bit. There's a little bit of pressure there, because we want the sound to feel like it's there. Otherwise, it's going to slide forward. If you start sounding more like the schwa, then you're letting the sound come too far forward. So even if you're open like this, but it's sounding more like either you're not open enough, or your tongue's not down enough, and or you're letting the sound come too far forward. Because if you're like up here and you try to say like ah, but you say even if it's in the back, it's going to sound more like a schwa because it's just not open enough. So if you start hearing that you're getting too close to another sound, like the schwa, which is the most common problem, then you know that you have to go farther back and or maybe farther down with the exact position there. So you want to use anchor points around, right? And another common problem, many languages have ah, right? Which is sort of like between ah and ah. And so it looks like David tried to send something, and I'll show this. I don't know why YouTube is trying to censor that. But if you're open enough, but you start rolling too far forward, then you might start sounding like ah, 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 which is not a sound in English. Okay, it's going to make you sound weird. If you instead of saying on, if you say on, that doesn't sound right. Very clear accent there. So based on what you're hearing, and if you need feedback, find a tutor. Again, maybe you can send me a recording or something, but if it sounds like it's too far forward, if it sounds like it's a schwa, if it sounds maybe too far up, like you're doing something. Maybe it's with your lips. Remember the way I teach you with the cot merger, the lips aren't involved. Okay, there are no lips. It's not aw. It's just ah. You just open your mouth. So maybe you're rounding your lips a little, and it's giving you a distorted sound. There's all kinds of little details. You need to pay attention to what you're actually doing, and then try to make little changes in the direction that you think will make it sound better. And it helps to have like a recording of a word. So if you say like, or the sound, so if you hear ah, and then you try to repeat ah, and you try to repeat, and you can make these little changes. And that's it. That's all it is. It's just the process of making micro adjustments and seeing, are you getting closer to the proper sound, or are you getting farther away from the proper sound? Based on if it's farther away or closer, you continue adjusting or adjust the other way. Again, the tenseness of the tongue or the relaxedness of the tongue, these are also factors. So you have to try to take everything into consideration and just play with it. Okay. That's why it can help to get feedback from a native who, especially a pronunciation teacher who might actually be able to pinpoint for you, like, oh, it sounds like you're too tense, or it sounds like you're too far forward. Where a regular native, they'll be able to tell you if you sound good or not, but they may not be able to tell you why you don't sound good. So, okay. For Zapium. Okay, I'm going to say that. We have the original name written in what I assume is Russian, maybe it's Ukrainian. I don't know. It just looks like Cyrillic. But for Zapium, I'm going to say your name for Zapium. Hopefully that is good enough. Hello. Yes, welcome to the chat. Finally, I see that you're here. We're kind of behind on questions. Okay, and I see you have some other things. Okay, I'd like to ask, is it possible to get rid of your accent 100%? Is it possible? Yes. Again, I can't guarantee that for all people, but I think for most people, or at least the average person, if nothing else, but I think for most people, it is possible, but it's a lot of work. I was talking about that a little earlier. If you're doing the right things and you're putting in the right work, or the right effort consistently, yes, it's possible, but it's not easy. Okay. It's not complicated. It's a very straightforward process, but you have to play with the sounds. You have to make changes. You have to, there's a process to it. And I'm part of my channel is hopefully to kind of give you guys that process, and the pieces that go with the process, like the sounds. So, Zenadine, same thing. I'm just like your client. When I started practicing shadowing, I started to find out English is freaking tricky. I felt like a fool. Yeah. So yeah, earlier when I was talking about my other student, yeah, exactly. Now, I think every language has a bit of a dynamic range. Okay, maybe more so in some languages. Like I think English, especially because our script is not phonetic. I think that it gets extra crazy in English, especially because it's a stress time language and we have reductions where like some other languages they don't have reductions. Maybe they're syllable stressed or sorry, syllable timed. Um, so I think it's special in English. But if you really, really focus in and listen to other languages, like say Spanish, which is, has a phonetic script, pretty consistent, not too crazy, you're still going to notice sometimes that they don't always hit exactly the same point, exactly the same sound. Like I mentioned before, I've heard there's no in Spanish, but there's e. But sometimes if you know the sound like if you're an English speaker, and you listen closely enough to Spanish speakers, you'll sometimes hear them say instead of e. And that's because they don't have the sound, so they have a bigger range. And so in Spanish, that's fine. It works just fine. Nobody notices. So I think it's just part of language in general. But that's the thing is most people, especially if you're going to learn a language that doesn't have a phonetic script, most people, they come to language learning or to any skill really, and they always underestimate the foundational level, the physical mechanical level, right? If you're going to learn the guitar, you need to know how to what to do with your hands and how to hit the strings and all this stuff, right? There's a physical process to that, and if you don't spend the time doing that, you don't have to, but if you don't spend the time really trying to master the physical part of that and you just start playing songs, that's one way to go. That's fine, but it's gonna be so much easier and relatively faster to try to get down the physical foundation first. It's the same with language. The whole language will open up to you, including the grammar and the vocabulary. Um, I mean, some areas will open up more than others, but it will open up the whole language if you focus on that foundational level. But people underestimate it and they're like, or maybe they think it's important, but they don't pay as close attention as they should because they think that they can hear what's going on. They don't realize they're not hearing certain sounds. So probably the biggest beginner mistake of all skill acquisition is underestimating the foundational physical mechanical element. Okay, David said, for learners, I get what you mean. It's like you can hear the vowel sound. You even know a lot of technical stuff about it, but you just can't for the life of you replicate it accurately. Yeah, yeah. And then daily for weeks. So you've been still bad, but a big improvement after using them daily for weeks, my personal opinion. Yeah, so coming back and touching on this really quick, some things take time. They take longer than other things. It's part of the process. It's just part of the process. And that's going to be a little different for everybody, either based on their own personal brain, their native language. There's lots of factors. We know the R sounds are usually a big problem for almost all English learners. So if you're consistent, if you keep going, if you're doing the right things, you're making little changes, you're working with the minimal pairs. Sometimes it takes an expert to kind of break you out because maybe you don't know what to do and what you've been doing isn't working. Sometimes you'll find yourself in that position and you need to talk to an expert where they can give you a new exercise or a new perspective, or a new type of explanation that is going to sort of allow your brain to be, oh, that's it, right? But it's part of the process. Just consistently keep going, and usually the problem will solve itself if you're just consistent enough and put in the effort. But yeah, with what David's saying, like you can hear the difference, but you can't replicate it accurately. That's like me with well, I guess it's not like yeah, in German with they have two, what I call the two schwa sounds. Because there's a sound that is pretty much the same as like it's like the English schwa. It's like the British er, and it's basically the German er, right? Where it's like sounds very much like a schwa. But then there's this other sound in German that's around the same area, and I can hear the difference between them, but it's very difficult for me to reproduce the difference because they're so close. Um, and the last time I was studying German several years ago, I did get to the point where I could reproduce the difference, but I didn't solidify it, and so now I'm just like I don't even remember how to do the other one. So that's the other thing. Once you find something, build the muscle memory. Build the muscle memory because you will lose it. You have to build the physical pathway in your brain to solidify it. Okay. Sedent also in the conversation. I completely get you talking to forlornness. This happens with me too. I can easily say bet, bit, bat, beat, but I can't produce a pure I vowel sound, especially how Josh makes it. Yeah, I know. I just have the most purest of pure vowel sounds. Um, so, yeah, some things are difficult. Some things are difficult. Gabriel, about shadowing. What's the best American accent to do shadowing? So I can watch some YouTubers that have the accent. That's a pretty valid question. It's hot in here. Let's see if I can open the window. It's actually hot today. It's been so cold recently. Well, relatively cold for San Diego anyway. Doesn't even reach freezing here, but okay. So the answer to this depends on you. It depends on your goal. If you don't have a particular accent or dialect that you want to reproduce, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're following my channel, I mean, I'm sure you probably watch videos from other teachers as well. Most teachers on YouTube, as far as I gather, they teach you general American. There are a few I've seen that teach you kind of like Northern American, which I mean, okay. And there's some Southern, not South American, but Southerners also teach it, and that's fine too. But General American through like the middle of the country and Western American. Western American has a couple key differences, of course, like the cot merger, but it's under the same umbrella as General American. And the average American from the West or from the middle of the country, when they talk to each other, they won't really notice many differences, if at all. So you can combine those two, but I specifically speak Western American. I don't think it's 100% because I have what's called the California O. I can do a regular O diphthong, but I also have the California O, which is easier for you guys to learn, as I've talked about before. And again, I'm also trying to give you little hacks and stuff that maybe it's not necessarily the way I speak all the time, but they're little things that make it easier where you can still sound natural. So what I would personally recommend is to shadow me essentially, because you just however I'm speaking is how I'm most likely going to teach you. But outside of that, watching my lessons, this can be kind of tricky because, as I said, General American is so very much similar to Western American that even for me, like I don't even usually notice the difference unless I'm really paying attention. And for most of my life, I never even noticed any difference at all. So most media, just as a general rule, especially if since like a lot of media comes out of like the LA area and stuff, most movies, a lot of TV shows, unless it's set in New York where maybe there's like some people have a New York accent, or if it's set in the South where people have like a Southern accent, you're probably going to be pretty safe, and it doesn't particularly matter. A lot of people you hear in the media are probably going to have a more of a Western American accent anyway. But again, the differences are so small that it doesn't matter. What you could do is you could try to shadow, just like pick people that you like, that they talk about things you're interested in, like on YouTube or TV shows that you like. Pick some people, make sure that it's not New York or Southern or whatever, some special, very regional dialect. They just sound like I do, more or less. And if you notice certain details, um, that are different than how I teach you, you can just ignore that part and switch it out for how I teach you. Right? It's not that big of a deal. So, you know, it's like when I was learning Spanish actively. At first, I hated the Spanish, like from Spain, Spaniard accent, which of course there's a couple different ones, but like the main one that you often hear. Um, I hated it at first, but then I started to like it, and I started to actually want to be able to like reproduce it, like if I chose to speak that way. And so I would intentionally, sometimes when I was shadowing, I was like, oh, how would I do this if I were like doing a Spaniard accent? And I would like switch out instead of "s" for "th" because that happens in Spanish in Spain. Um, and so you can make little adjustments. But as long as you don't hear a very clear regional accent, then it doesn't really matter what you shadow. Okay. Do. I will also mention though, many Canadians, not all Canadians, but many Canadians, um, especially I think Western Canadians, like in the western half of Canada, speak basically the same way as Western Americans do. Um, there might be a couple little tiny differences here and there, but usually if I hear a Canadian speak, like on YouTube or something, I won't even notice they're Canadian unless they specifically say they're Canadian. So that opens up some more options for you as well. Usually the biggest difference is instead of saying ow, they'll say ooh. Like instead of about, they'll say a boot. Um, and sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious, but they generally sound exactly the same as we do. So, does the name Abraham have three different sounds? What is the opinion for most Americans about women with strong voices like Elizabeth Olsen? I don't know who Elizabeth Olsen is. um, okay, does the name Abraham have three different sounds? Yes, Abraham. Well, yeah, I think you mean three separate syllables because it has many different sounds. But yeah, Abraham. Um, and then what is the opinion for most Americans about women with strong voices? I think you mean like more like because I don't know who Elizabeth Olsen is, but I think maybe you mean like a deeper voice. Um, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would think that the stereotypical perception would be like women should have not so deep voices. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't care, but most Americans might have that perception. Yeah. So, um, so it probably wouldn't be preferred, right? Wouldn't prefer a woman with a deeper voice, which is stupid. But okay, forlornness. Is it good to shadow videos or podcasts? Just an average person talking naturally and not stopping at all, no matter what their speed is. Basically, trying to repeat everything as they go. Very excellent question. And actually, I forget to mention this sometimes, but probably the best shadowing material is talk shows. Talk shows, interview shows, preferably where it's not like a formal type of setting, so maybe not like a news interview, but something that's more relaxed, like I mean Oprah, Ellen, just two people talking, like it's like just a recording, like a conversation of two people, because then you're going to get like the real speech. Where what I've noticed about in TV shows, even shows like Friends, like we don't consciously notice this. They're speaking very naturally, but they're actors, right? At the end of the day, they're actors, and it doesn't really like you have to be like a godly like actor or something. I don't know to really pull off 100%, 100% of the time, complete like perfection of what would be in real life. And again, this isn't something we usually notice because it's like, oh, his acting is fantastic. He sounds natural. There's no big deal. But when you really get down to it, I've noticed like when I'm listening, I did a couple lessons listening analysis for Friends, and I took two clips from Friends. And as I was really listening close, like really, really listening close to how they were speaking, I noticed that they tend to enunciate a little bit more than we might in everyday life. And again, it's a dynamic flow, right? There's no like perfect right answer here, but I noticed that because since they are actors and they have to speak clearly enough, they're not over enunciating everything, but it's not perfect. Like if you're going to try to shadow, it's maybe not the absolute perfect shadow material. Now, I could be splitting hairs here, and it's not that big of a deal. If you shadow something from Friends, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine. But really, the best material is, informal talk shows, things where people are speaking very naturally. They're not focused on enunciating or anything. They're just speaking. Okay. Um, Now, when you say not stopping at all, no matter what their speed is, basically trying to repeat everything as they go. So for the repeating everything as they go, that is a form of shadowing that can be extremely useful. Um, Now, I wouldn't do that for like a whole episode of something, for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or even for 10 minutes. But um, there is value in maybe taking a piece and, for say, I don't know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and just trying to match what they say as they go, like in real time. There is some value to that, but that's also so much and so fast that you're going to get sort of a speed bonus and a bit of an automaticity bonus, like how the sounds kind of flow through your mouth. Um, you're training that aspect of the mechanical, but in terms of the accuracy of hitting the proper sounds and the stress and all this stuff, you're going to lose a lot of that if you just try to like repeat everything, blah 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 as they go. So value to it, but you also have to take the time to really slow down, focus in on what's being said. And you can combine all this, right? You can do slow sometimes, fast sometimes, slow and fast. There's no perfect right answer here, but um, yeah. Okay. Can you give some examples how to blend the ing plus in together in a phrase? You mean in a phrase? Typo on the G there. Or maybe it was a joke. uh, how to blend. So, can you give some examples of that? Because off the top of my head. So you mean like for example, if I say like I don't know, like walking in, kind of like that. I'll wait for your response to that to clarify. But moving on, we're almost caught up. Yay. Is Kurt in? Oh, okay. Second vowel, vowel number two. Also a possibility. I say it like yes. This is another example. So we can do a glottal stop on the T. It's very commonly happens. Very very commonly happens. But for the vowel, so you can actually do a syllabic N. You can say curtain, curtain. That's another possibility here because we have that ability to stop the glottal stop the T there, just like mountain. But with curtain, if you do pronounce the vowel, it can be I, or it can reduce to a schwa. I think the full pronunciation is supposed to be I. But this is also with like words like mountain curtain. This is another example of why I say that the upside down V and the upside down E are part of the range for one sound, and that the ultimate end of that range is the syllabic consonant of whatever's after it. Because curtain with a T, right? But normally we're going to stop it. Instead of doing a flap, there's some words where we do a glottal because it's just what we do. So in supposed to be in. It could reduce to a schwa, so we change it from it to a curtain. That's okay. You don't want to enunciate that schwa too much because otherwise it starts sounding weird. But if you're saying curtain, pull the curtain. That's fine. But you can take that to the extreme case where you actually just completely drop the schwa altogether and go straight into the N, syllabic N, curtain. And that's actually probably the single most common way to say it is with a stop T and a syllabic N. Okay. Do you think in California accent I vowel is a bit more stressed than usual? I haven't particularly observed that. Um, I haven't tried to notice that. I would say no. Maybe if I were to focus on it to be sure, then maybe, but I wouldn't think so. Um, in like a full California English, where which I like to call like the surfer accent. Um, a lot of the vowels tend to get exaggerated and stressed. It's just because the vowels sort of move in the mouth compared to Western or standard General American. Um, so like instead of saying like bro, like most people say bro, right? But they'll say like brah. Like they'll completely change it like brah, like hey brah, you know. So some sounds will actually just completely change the vowel. Um, some words will completely change the vowel. But yeah, sometimes I've noticed that the vowels can be a bit exaggerated. So it could be that the I is maybe more stressed or more elongated in a way, or more like it maybe has a slightly different quality. That's possible. Um, but I haven't specifically observed that. Um, okay, Canadians commonly pronounce organization as organization, organia, organization. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading that wrong. But spell the word. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things. In case you guys don't know, so in British spelling, there are many things spelled with a Z, or sorry, with an S. That in American English, the same word is spelled with a Z. It's a very common spelling change, or where like certain words that have an OR ending, like savior or color, they're spelled OUR in British English, but they're just spelled OR in American English. And I don't know if this is 100% true in all cases, but what I've noticed in Canadian spelling is that they tend to have more of an American pronunciation, but a British spelling. So if you ever see an American spell organization, or somebody who you think is an American spell organization with an S, you know that they're probably Canadian. um, thank you. It was very helpful. Okay, good. I remember I answered your question a while ago, or questions. Yes, we had three questions. Okay. Nia, then, oh, I see. You already addressed this. You saw it was coming. The N plus A plus E diphthong. Oh, yeah, that's the one that YouTube tried to block. Well, I would definitely not write NYE for that. um, so you mean nigh, like organi, like the diphthong? Because it's supposed to be like you can use the diphthong there. But what you're doing is if you're saying fifth vowel plus e, that's not I. That would be ah, ah, organi, I. That sounds weird. That is very weird. Um, Remember, the diphthong is not fifth vowel plus e. The diphthong starts in the front of the mouth, not the back of the mouth. Okay, I wish all vowels were as simple as E. Is there a language that doesn't have this vowel sound? I know. I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert in languages, and I don't speak, a bajillion languages. But every language that I've looked at for the pronunciation has the E sound. That seems to be like a pretty universal vowel. In my experience, I know you speak a few languages as well. In my experience, right, languages will have E, and it'll sound almost exactly the same in all languages. Eh, or something very close to eh, like the start of the A diphthong in English. One of those two. An A sound, like or ah or something like that. But usually just the one in my experience. And then an O or an oo, but where the O and the oo is more stiff. And it doesn't have as much rounding on the lips, like oh, ooh. So vowels in many languages are a lot simpler compared to English. Not all languages, of course, but English has a very difficult group of vowels. So that sucks. Um, that's also why I try to make it easier for you guys, because people say, "Oh, this is our color, that's our colored," and there's this extra vowel and that extra vowel. I'm just like, well, just 10 vowels plus the half L. It's a special case. No big deal, right? And there's the R-colored vowels, but I limit the number um, that there are. So, oh, cool. God, it's already been almost 3 hours. This is ridiculous. I do have a time limit today, but that's still like more than a half an hour away. So, okay, I wish all vowels were. We just did that. Okay. Also, how much is your? Yeah, that's a very informal spelling. I'll allow it. That's okay. You are very informal. But your prepositions book, thought of getting it regarding the. Yeah, I usually ask natives. It's like that. They can't tell what it is, but they know it's wrong. Yeah. If I were to listen to you, and I couldn't tell what it is, then you're good because I have really good ears. Sometimes a learner will get so close to the sound that I'm not sure what they need to change. Um, and for the average speaker's ears, you're going to sound perfect. Um, but yeah, that's a common thing. If you don't ask somebody who actually knows about pronunciation, because like before I started teaching this, I was the same type of person. Like I wouldn't be able to. I would just say, "Well, you have an accent. It doesn't sound quite right. I don't know what's going on." So yeah, it's what it is. For the preposition book, it's available on Amazon. I forget what I have it at. There's an ebook and the physical book. I forget the prices. I think the ebook is like $5, $6 or something like that. The physical book is obviously more because there's the printing cost and all that. But yeah, it's not super crazy expensive. Also, if you join my Patreon, for my first 10 patrons, which I'm at 8 now, for my first 10 patrons, I'm giving you all of my ebooks for free. So there's that possibility if you want, even if you just sign up for like the $2 a month option, that's perfectly fine. After my first 10 patrons, there's I think you have to do $10 a month or more, and you get all my ebooks for free. If you do $5 a month, I think I have it to where you can choose one or two of my ebooks or something like that. So, you can also maybe get some free stuff through Patreon if you want to support me there. But that's completely up to you. How far have you gone? Oh, also there's a workbook that goes with the preposition book, and you don't necessarily need the workbook, but it really helps to have both of them. How far have you gone in Spanish so far? I'm interested because I rarely meet natives being advanced in the languages. I'm asking about the accent and word choice preposition. Yeah, see, this is what I said. Like when you reach the upper intermediate level, you're good. Like most universities only require you to have a B2 level, like in whatever language, or the approximate B2. I'm using the European reference, the upper intermediate level, and that's to go to university. It's like most people think like, oh, to go to university, clearly I would have to have like a really high level. No. um, and the problem is once you reach that upper intermediate level, you can do so much and understand so much, not perfectly, not 100%. There's still more to learn, of course, but you can already do so much. You're so comfortable that it becomes harder to try to push up to that advanced level, especially because the gap between upper intermediate and advanced is so huge. It's so very, very huge. Um, and it takes the most time, aside from going from C1 advanced to C2 advanced, which is native like or bilingual, quote unquote. That's the one that can take years potentially. But how far have I gotten in Spanish? My Spanish is very rusty right now because I haven't really spoken it much in the last like 2 years. I still listen to music. I still, I'll use it here and there occasionally because I live in San Diego, and sometimes, um, there are Spanish speakers that I'll talk to in Spanish. But at the height of my Spanish ability, because since I'm a little rusty now, I was definitely my knowledge. I could pass like a C1 grammar test very easily. I think I tested into like a C2 grammar level. I don't know all the grammar details. There's certain little things with the articles and stuff that are difficult, but yeah. So my knowledge of the language quite high. My speaking ability, my listening ability, of course, was a little higher than my speaking ability, but my speaking ability was probably nearing the advanced level. I could talk about pretty much anything I wanted to talk about. If I got back into it, like right off the top of my head right now, I'd probably make more mistakes than usual. But if I got back into it, um, I'd probably be right back where I was after a little bit of practice. Um, and there are various reasons why I stopped. Partially because I wanted to go to other languages. Spanish was the language that I guess you could say taught me how to learn a language because I started trying to learn Japanese when I was 13 by myself, having no idea what to do, using some books, using some whatever. I experimented with a little bit of German. I experimented with some stuff here and there. And it wasn't until like 2014 um, when I actually had like the time and boredom because I was living away from home at the time uh, to really hone in because I was working as a delivery driver, a bike delivery driver in downtown Tucson, Arizona, and I hated that job. I absolutely hated that job, and I said I need to do something. I need to learn something so that I can work for myself. And because I always liked languages, and because I knew I had a talent for languages, there are reasons why I know that. We don't have to go into that, but I do have a natural talent for languages, luckily. um, I figured if I learn languages, I could work for myself. I could translate. I could do whatever. I don't know. I didn't even know about italki yet. I found italki because I knew I would have to practice speaking Spanish, and here we are now, all because of italki. But long story short, um, I spent probably about 2 years trying to figure out how to learn Spanish, like how to learn a language. And I had, previous exposure, previous things that I had tried and didn't really work. But that when I was trying to teach myself Spanish, that's when I discovered all the polyglots like Benny Lewis and Steve Kaufman and Luca Lampariello and all these different techniques, which eventually led to my one of my other books, How to Learn a Language, and how to build your own path to fluency. That plane is kind of loud. But yeah, so that by the time I reached sort of the upper intermediate level, I was so exhausted with Spanish and I was so tired of it. I was just like, I'll come back to this later. Like I'm done. And I never like I kind of came back to it a little bit after that, but I never got back into it the way that I was studying it before. Um, and my main thing is I was doing language exchanges, and I did that a bit for Japanese and a bit for German. But I reached the point where I said, "There's nothing wrong with language exchanges. They're really great, especially if you don't have a lot of money. But you have to spend half the time speaking your own language." And I reached the point where I said, "I don't want to do that anymore. I want to pay a tutor, a cheap tutor, to give me conversation practice where I can just spend the whole time speaking that language." Um, so for the last few years, especially this last year, what I've really been trying to do is build up, different income streams. And that's finally starting to take off a little bit here and there, so that I can have the money to actually pay the tutors to practice the languages, um, because I haven't really been in a position to do that with how I want my finances to be. So, um, because of that, I could be much more advanced in Spanish, but here we are, and I might take it up to the advanced level in the future. But Spanish is actually the reason I chose Spanish is because in my analysis at the time, it was the one language that I kind of wanted to learn, but I thought would be the easiest out of all the languages I'm interested in. And I still stand by that. I think I made a very accurate analysis between German, Spanish, French, Russian, Mandarin, Japanese. I don't know if I mentioned Japanese yet. No, Japanese. Those are the six main ones I want to learn. Also, probably Korean and some other ones that I'm interested in. Um, but Portuguese, um, and Spanish does seem like it's relatively the simplest one to learn out of all those. So it is what it is. I am where I am. I don't know if I'm going to improve my Spanish in the future, but I am definitely going to learn and improve other languages in the future. Is it common to pronounce depths as depths and lengths as lengths. Yes, it is. It is extremely common and probably the most natural way to say it. Just like it's very similar to months. I'm never on the chat. Very similar to months, right? We talked about that before with like the THS pronunciation. Um, and this doesn't apply to all cases, of course, but it's very, very common that if you have actually what's really happening here, remember I mentioned earlier three consonants in a row, three consonant sounds in a row. When part of the reason why we tend to drop the th in months and change it to more of a t, it's actually not really a t. We're kind of just pushing. We're in the n and we're pushing the s through that position, so it sounds kind of like there's a t there. It's okay. It doesn't really matter. But we're kind of dropping that middle consonant sound. So this is actually just another example of that rule. So when we say depths, we're just dropping that middle consonant sound, the th, or lengths, same thing. The interesting thing about lengths is it's supposed to be lang with a j and then lengths, lengths. But that's kind of hard to say. So we'll usually change it to a k and then drop the th, lengths. So either way is fine. One is more clearly enunciated, but the more common, less enunciated way is to drop the th. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, yeah, can I say walk in? Okay, so back to this question. Walking in. Well, so are you reducing walking to walk in? So I have a whole lesson talking about the ing. And this is a whole big ball of blah. So basically with the ing, not other ones, but with the ing, when you add ing to a word, in Western American, we tend to do a regular N and the first vowel E. In, Joaquin, instead of walking in the back with the second vowel. You can do either one, it doesn't matter. They both sound natural. So it kind of depends on which one you're doing and then moving into in, right? If you do the informal added ing pronunciation, like walking, I'm walking down the street, then that's just going to be a regular N, and it's just walking in. So you're just going to connect the N to the next word in. If you do walking the way that I speak, and you go to in, then it's the same thing. You're going to go E to N, and then the N is going to connect to the second vowel E in the word in. So it's in. Okay, that's all it is. Walking in. If you do the back N, as I call it, with the second vowel, which you can also, the hack I have for you is to do the first vowel, E, with the back N. I don't actually talk that way, but you'll still sound natural, and it's, in my analysis, the easiest way for most English learners to do it. But whether you use that first vowel or that second vowel, if you use the back N instead of the front N, which is the NG sound, then the is going to connect, because that's a consonant by itself. It's going to connect to the I in. And in the NG sound, the back N, there's not supposed to be a G. Okay, G is not part of the sound. I talked about that extensively in the lesson about the NG and in the lesson about the hack, the ing hack. So there's not supposed to be a G. It's not walking, okay? If a little bit of a G comes out, that's okay. Now, as you're moving from word to word, and especially if there's a connection to a vowel, okay? Consonants connect to vowels. So what can happen as you release that back position, a little bit of a G might come out. Now, you don't want to say walking in. That's not right, because there's not supposed to be a G there. But if you have a little bit of a G, that's okay. Walking in, gin. It's okay. Ideally, you want to pull off that back end without letting a G come out, and it would be like walking okay, walking in. And that's how you would do it. Just as long as you don't have a really strong G sound between the and the you're fine. But yeah, that's a common problem. So anyway, a little gun never hurt anyone. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, but a lot of guh will hurt everybody. No. Let's see. I love. Oh yeah. Okay. So next one. David, I love how your roommates. Yeah. Okay. Cat. Yeah. It's actually not my cat. Well, the big cat. Oh, she's actually over there now. She's just staring at something. She's like staring at the floor. Um, she is kind of my cat because she's always in my room and always wants my attention. But yeah, it's actually my roommate's cat. So I love how your roommate's cat uh, just nonchalantly opens the door and leaves as if nothing happened. Yeah, I know. Yeah, she does that. Sometimes she'll sit there and wait for me, and she'll be like, "Meow." I'm like, "I'm not going to open the door for you." So she'll open it herself. She's very spoiled. But additional question to the depths lengths one: could wits become something like wits? Yes, exactly. Wits. It's the same thing. Now, in that case, that one it seems a little bit weird because when we say wits, it's a T. When we say widths, right? The width is supposed to be with a D sound, not a T sound. Um, and usually, what happens is the S, not all the time, but the S frequently gets affected by the voiced or voicelessness of the previous sound. So if the previous sound is voiced, not all the time, but that is a common trigger to change the S at the end into a Z sound because Z is voiced. Makes it easier to speak. Some words don't do that. Um, in this case, we actually have a very rare example of a change happening in a backwards flow instead of a forwards flow, because most changes in English flow forward um, with the effects of things, like how like voiced will affect voiced. Like we talk about the ed ending. It's a voice sound. It'll make the D voiced. If it's a voiceless sound, it'll make the ed into a T sound. Um, but this one flows the other way, and we're actually going to change the D into a T, drop the TH, and keep the S. Um, and so the voiceless S is actually changing the D into a T. A very special case, very rare, very special case. But yes, we would say like wits, wits. What are the wits? Now you could push out widths. What are the widths? It's kind of hard to say, but that's the fully enunciated way to say it, and it's fine. Either way, it doesn't matter. Um, wits is not informal or anything. It's just another way to say it. I do language. So yeah, language exchanges. We're not going to make both plural. Like I think in Spanish, God, yeah, I would say intercambios de idioma. I wouldn't make language plural. Maybe my Spanish is wrong there, but I assume you added the S either as a typo or because you're a Spanish speaker. But yeah, language exchanges. It's like a compound word. With Russian women all the time. And the whole exchange is in Spanish. Pretty okay with this. So you're helping Russian women practice their Spanish. That's okay. Yeah. Not really helping you learn Russian or English, but you spend your time how you want. That's fine. Um, okay. Six City. Why is elves a word but dwarves isn't? What do you mean? They're both words. I don't understand. Dwarves isn't a word since why was I not informed? Like in the dictionary, does it not bring up dwarves? Because that would be interesting. Um, I think elf or elves, that's like the token fantasy, like different race creature word that like is in the general language. And then when you start talking about like dwarves and maybe goblins, hobbits, orcs, like it gets more like if you're not into that stuff, it's like you don't really know what that is. Um, dwarves. A dwarf is in the dictionary. I don't understand the question. Anyway, so I guess I'll move on. uh, how do you say centaur? Yeah, definitely not centaur. Yeah, centaur. Like I can't imagine anybody saying it that way. Um, Centaur. Yeah. And it's gonna be fifth vowel. So R colored fifth vowel. R. Centaur. 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 He's a centaur. 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 Yeah, it sounds weird. I think there's another way to say it, a slightly different way than centaur. 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 Because that seems like I've heard another way to say it, but I can't think of it. Definitely not centaur. That's maybe some people say it that way. I don't know. It's weird. Um, okay, did you stop teaching on italki to focus more on your channel? Well, technically, I am still teaching on italki very limitedly, but essentially, yes. I have so my channel. I'm trying to build up my channel to get reach the point where it's monetized, and then of course I'm still going to be making videos. I'm not just going to stop, obviously. But that's been one of my big main goals for like the last, especially the last like 4 to 6 months. But because as I said, I'm trying to build up like different income streams. And for various reasons, I want to move away from active teaching and move more towards, helping more people, and, getting my perspective and my way of teaching out to a lot of people because apparently it helps a lot of you guys and you really like it. So uh, I think I've mentioned this to some of you before. Some of you are probably newer here, maybe some newer subscribers, or you just haven't been in the live streams recently or whatever. But I think I mentioned a bit about this before. I'm the type of person who, for whatever reason or reasons, I'm not going to be doing one thing for my entire life. I can't. I absolutely can't. So when I started teaching English on Italki, at first it was a way to make some extra money and to start to maybe move away from having to work a delivery driver job, which teaching English was much more enjoyable than that. Because as I said, I found Italki because I knew I had to practice speaking Spanish, and then I found out if you're a native speaker, you can apply on Italki to become an informal tutor just for being a native speaker, and you get accepted. Um, so I became an informal tutor. Later, I got my professional certificate and all that stuff. And there we go. But from the day I started teaching English, I was like, oh, this is really enjoyable. But I already knew in the back of my mind that eventually, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe longer, I don't know. Eventually, I was going to be doing something else. And it's been, God, 5.5, 5 to 6 years, somewhere in that range now, more than 5 years, uh, actively teaching English. That's part of the reason why I want to do the channel, because the channel is something where I'm not like actively teaching. I mean, like I have Patreon, I'm helping people through there and stuff, but it's it's not where like I'm sitting through 5, 6, 7 hours of classes every day or whatever, talking to many many different people, which is also hard for my brain to balance and keep track of everything, even with notes that I take down. um, my monitor is going dark. Okay. So if I'm doing it this way, like there's live streams and stuff, I can answer you guys' questions. I can make videos on your guys' questions, but I can get monetized through YouTube, maybe monetized through some other avenues, like maybe on Facebook or whatever. And so I'll actually have some income coming from it, without having to have like the direct, constant one-on-one, trying to juggle a bunch of students thing. And I can spend some time focusing on some other things that I want to do. So I actually have a whole set of plans moving into the future. And in fact, I haven't told you guys, but on the side, I'm also starting up an eBay reselling business, to help generate a little bit of extra money, at least in the short term. Maybe I don't know how long I'm going to take it, but and maybe it doesn't get off the ground, but I'm going to make it work. So I'm super busy. I'm trying to teach English, trying to make video for you guys, trying to start up a second business. I'm going to be trying to make a software for ear training for you guys, at some point in the relatively near future. um, hopefully. And I want to improve my skills with the guitar, maybe make music, record music, and so it's like I want my ideal life, also drawing. My ideal life is putting together all these different pieces of things I like to do, and having them all be like in themselves, they may not be enough to support me, but combined, they all come together to basically become, like my living and all that stuff. So it's complicated, long story, blah blah blah, whatever. But I'm still going to be making videos. You know, I don't plan on stopping this channel anytime soon. But yes, a large reason why I'm trying to move away from italki is because I'm trying to focus more on the channel, and build that up. But anyway, I would love to learn Spanish. If anyone can help me, that would be amazing. Um, yeah, Seaton just wants to learn Spanish because then he doesn't have to worry about the I vowel, the second vowel. um, so yeah, Spanish is pretty awesome. It's pretty cool. It's actually the language I'm least interested in, but I thought it would be the fastest, so here we are. Still a great language. I really like it. Okay. Oh, it is. Well, never mind. I thought dwarves was considered wrong, and I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah. Well, when I looked up in the dictionary, let's see, what did it say specifically? I typed in dwarf. No, dwarves. It says the plural could be spelled both ways. And in the weird mechanical audio recording they have, they do pronounce it with a V sound. So yeah, I don't think people say dwarfs. Like maybe I don't think there's like it's a mythical race. Like, whether it has a V sound or an F sound, I don't think particularly matters. But because we spell it with a V, what is it, wolves, dwarves, we'll probably keep the V sound. Uh, Either way, it doesn't matter. But yeah, interesting observation. So, the centaur question was because literally all dictionaries only include the centaur pronunciation, and yet no native speaker I've met or asked this says it like that. That's what I'm telling you guys. I really don't think the dictionary is a good source of pronunciation information. It's great for definitions. It's great for maybe example sentences. It's not good for pronunciation. So, at least in English. When natives say wire, it seems to me instead of wire, it comes out more like wire. Like they start with W and then glide from it on the ah vowel to the war, 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 war. To me, that sounds like a southern pronunciation. Um, like I don't know. I gotta hook up the wires. Gotta hook up the wires. Wires. Yeah. Definitely sounds more southern to me. Maybe it's like an East Coast thing. Maybe they do that in New York. I don't know, something like that. But definitely, yeah. That's not the way that we say it in Western or General American for sure. Um, Definitely not Western American. Something similar also happens with while rather than while. It sounds to me like wall. Not that I'm only speaking about when they're unstressed and pronounced fast. Okay, I'll take that into consideration. Why are you doing it? Or got it. Okay. See, that little detail is important because when you bring a particular word to the focus of a native, we're going to go to the full enunciation, like the fully pronounced word, unless there's like an obvious case like mountain or whatever, where it's usually a stop. Um, so, yes, with wire, if I'm saying that very quickly and lazily, that I is probably going to become R. War. So, like, if I say, why are you doing that? Um, like, why are you doing that? Why are you? Why are you? And we don't notice it that way. Like before you mentioned this, I was just like, what? But yeah, it's a very natural way to say it. That's again part of the dynamic range and flow. Actually, the I diphthong. I've noticed that in faster speech, the faster and lazier you say I, the more it becomes like, see, I, I don't know. It could become potentially a schwa in some cases, but it kind of just becomes like a monophthong where instead of I, it's like I, uh, I, I. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. Like that. The first part of it is like just really stiff. Sounds like a different sound. Like a sound. Um, so with while, let's see. If I say like, I don't know, I'll do it while you're busy. I'll do it while do it while you're busy. While. Yep. In fact, it'll sound like wall. The word wall. Um, W fifth vowel, spelled AL, but the L is it represents the fifth vowel here, AW. Silent W, silent L, and then the L at the end is the L color dark L vowel. Anyway, and I finally caught up with all the questions after 3.5 hours. Can I call a midget? No, you cannot. um, Good question to ask because you got to know these things. But no, that is considered extremely offensive. Like that's the word. In fact, midget is also considered offensive. It's not politically correct. Um, but dwarf is even worse. That's like dwarf is probably the worst thing that you can call um, a person like that. The political correct thing you're supposed to call them like little people. I think I'm pretty sure that's what we're supposed to say, little people. Um, but yeah, so I would avoid dwarf for sure, and I would probably avoid midget. It's not politically correct, but not everybody cares about political correctness. When we're not around little people, I can't speak for everybody, but I think the average person, if like there's not a little person around, um, then I think a lot of people just use the word midget. Um, but you know, um, anyway, okay, we're all caught up with the questions, and we're down to 7 people. um, this is probably the best live stream we've had in terms of all the engagement. Um, how would you say police like that? Police, police, police. It's not police, police. I think some people might say it that way on purpose if like to sound a certain way, like oh, it's the police. Sounds kind of funny, but yeah, the normal way to say it is with it's a schwa sound. Police, 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 police. Yeah, pretty much be a schwa sound. And my soda is warm, and my cookie is getting hard. Too many questions. I'm going to allow that only because of reasons. YouTube tried to block this message for obvious reasons. So yeah, Louis C.K. has a very funny joke about the word retarded. I really hope the YouTube algorithm doesn't like say, "Hey, we're not going to promote your channel because you're using these words." But um, these are words that you guys need to know. Some of you already know the words, but these are words that you guys need to know. And political correctness is a topic that some people say, well, you have to be politically correct. Other people say, screw political correctness. Um, I'm sensitive to political correctness, but um, I also think that we should be able to laugh at things. We should be able to joke about things, as long as it's not in a malicious way. Um, I mean, there's a line, there's a fine line there, but when things become so serious that you can't say certain things, um, I don't know. I think it becomes a problem. But it's also understandable. I understand both sides. But anyway, yeah. So as English learners, I mean, even if it's just to avoid the words, you guys need to know what these words are. So I don't mind talking about them. But um, yeah, retarded is definitely not a politically correct word. Back in the '90s, the early 2000s, it was like more acceptable, I think, and especially like high schoolers and stuff. Like we would use it all the time. People I knew used it all the time. I didn't really use it too much, but um, I would use it here and there. I say, "Oh, that's retarded," but um, things change, culture changes. That's fine. Um, is it ever an option to drop the schwa in police and just skip to the unstressed sound or to the stressed sound? Yeah, I was gonna say unstressed. I don't know why I put an un in there. um, please, 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 please. That's a tough one. Hold on. Please, 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 please. Yes, yes. So if you're speaking quickly, and obviously you're not fully enunciating because we're trying to reduce even further. Yes. So it would sound exactly like please, may I have some whatever, um, except with an S at the end instead of a Z sound at the end. But you have to be speaking quickly. Again, this is part of the dynamic range and flow, especially when it comes to the schwa. The ultimate end of that schwa is disappearing. Okay, and it doesn't always do that. It doesn't always do that. You can't always do that, but it is a feature of the sound, right? Where you go all the way to dropping it. So we're seeing another example of that. Or correct instead of correct. Yes, that also works. Again, faster, lazier speech, not a problem. Not a problem. But if you say like, if I ask you a question and then you say correct, correct, like you're trying to say it very clearly like that while dropping the first syllable, it's going to start to sound weird. But yeah, it's perfectly fine. And again, not informal. Just it's a variation. It's a variation. So there's so many things as a native that you know that I'm aware of. Well, as a native and as a pronunciation teacher, that I'm aware of that or even things that I'm not quite yet aware of that you guys bring to my attention. So many things that it's like I just want to give it all to you. Just like this is how people speak English. Like and it's at the end of the day, it's just a lot of information. But it's just like I don't know. In the back of my mind, I've been partially subconsciously devising a way to teach um, how the essential flow of English speech feels and why it flows the way it flows. Obviously, that's a very abstract, difficult thing to do, but I think that's kind of what I've very, very slowly been working towards subconsciously. And this idea of like the dynamic range and flow and quality of sounds is a really big piece of that I just recently became conscious of. So, who knows? Maybe in another year or two, I'll have a much easier way to explain all of this to you. But do you think the eval sounds different before and after a consonant? In, 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 in. I would say no. Any difference that you're hearing is just the literal difference of the fact that it's coming before or after. So, I mean, technically, it's if you say in, that is going to sound different than ne, just because the order is different. And I think that's all that's all the difference is. The sound itself, um, I wouldn't say changes, especially like with how it feels in my mouth. It feels exactly the same positions. Um, yeah. You're doing incredible, and what I love is that you really have an ear for these nuances. Some natives just flat out refuse to acknowledge certain things, like the month. What? Really? Why? That's part of how people speak. Like, what? I mean, it's one thing to maybe say, "Oh, you shouldn't say it that way because it's not proper," even though it doesn't matter. But to like not acknowledge it, like that's shocking. That is very shocking. By the way, do you find the English voice on Google Translation to be natural sounding? I'm curious because the voice in my native tongue is very artificial and overly precise. um, yeah, so I would probably concur with that, but I'll listen to it again just to give it a fresh sample. I haven't listened to it in a long time because um, since Google Translate isn't perfect, even when I'm learning a language, I might consult it from time to time, but I never trust Google Translate because I like to, if I'm going to look something up, I like to be certain that it's the right answer. Um, so let's go ahead and say I don't know. I saw a man. I don't know why that always comes up in my head. Um, Oh, that's a cool feature. You play it twice, and the second time it slows it down. That's a pretty cool feature. That would be very, very useful for language learning if it actually, sounded like a human. Yeah. Um, I mean, if we're not talking about language learning, if we're talking about like me as a native speaker listening to that voice, obviously it doesn't sound 100% natural, but it sounds close enough where it's kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of impressive. Like, that's not bad. It's pretty close. Um, but when you're learning a language and you hear that voice, that's not something that you want to be shadowing or relying on. And I mean, it's probably going to hit a lot of the same sounds, but what I'm hearing from playing the Google Translate voice, it the rhythm is definitely off because she's saying, "I saw a man, I saw a man," and that's obviously not the way we say it. Like nobody would ever say it that way. um, so the rhythm is and the stress is definitely off, but the sounds are pretty solid. It's just the quality of the voice is a bit robotic, to be sure. Um, it's not horrible, but for language learning, I would not recommend that as a practice reference. Um, good question. Yeah. Okay. Oh, look, I have to go. Actually, my time is up. Because I have to go do something. So I was just thinking of ending the live stream. It's been 3.5 hours, and the questions have quelled. It's a fun word to learn. The questions have. I might not even be using that word right. um, to quell. Let's see. Suppress, to vanquish, to quiet or allay, as in emotions or anxiety. Yeah, it's a very fancy word. Technically, I'm using it right, but not in a common context the way that it's normally used. Okay, so yes, the questions have pretty much ceased. It's over 3.5 hours. I have to go. So, anything else? Any last minute questions or whatever? Thanks, Josh, for the awesome live stream. You are welcome. Thank you for everything. Say hi to the cat. Does she have a name? She does. Where is she? Where'd she go now? Oh, she's under the table. This one's name is Salem. Because she's a black cat, and Salem, which is, it's a common witch. It's a common name for witch cats. And since she's a black cat, my roommate called her Salem. So there we go. But anyway, thank you. Can't wait for the next live. Awesome. Very good. Yes. Every Thursday for the foreseeable future, we'll be here. Um, and say, let me, yes, I'll say hi to the cat. Next week, I don't know the exact time. I might make it like 11 or so. Kind of vary it a little bit. So yeah, just you can see. I'll post it before then, and you can see. Good night. Yes. Well, it's 4:30 here. It's not that late, but yeah, you're at a different. I don't even want to know what time it is where you are. Okay. Yes. Good night. Goodbye. Good evening. Good morning. Hello. And I will see you guys next week. It's 9 p.m. Yeah, it's pretty late. Okay. Bye.